We start with the narrator questioning what the most important thing that is part of youth is. Among the possibilities, striving radically for the future was one of them. Another possibility is that an important thing that is part of youth is strong friendships. Additionally, the last option is a relationship that many young people experience during their youth. However, in his mind, our protagonist responds no. As for him, those were illusory things and were not enough. He states that there are some incomprehensible interactions between people, meaning it was very difficult to find people who truly understood each other. In other words, if he ignores the desire to understand another person, then the so-called love will lose its meaning. At that moment, our protagonist sees a love letter that is being directed at him. Having his thoughts interrupted, the boy picks it up and wonders how he should deal with such sudden affection. Tapping a piece of paper against his head, the young man states that for him, receiving a confession was a hassle. At that moment, we see a pink-haired girl sitting, and our protagonist arrives at the place calling her name. The young girl, upon realizing who is being called, seems to get a little nervous. Baikao responds that if she wanted to talk about an activity report, she should just speak to him at the school council. However, irritated, the girl states that once again, he was playing dumb. Aggressively, she states that she will kill the boy if he does not listen to her. Nervous, our protagonist pretends not to understand while turning to leave. But at that moment, Yoeo grabs the young man by the collar of his shirt, telling him to come to her. She places our protagonist between her legs while resting his head on two round spheres. Shyly, the girl comments that she liked the boy, but he is left speechless. Then she asks if he could be her boyfriend. Silence spreads throughout the place, and Baikao seems to be very confused. In his mind, the young man was in disbelief that he was receiving a confession, while thinking that he could not accept because he did not want to fall in love yet. However, he says he was afraid to refuse as she was the champion of the archery club, and at that moment, the girl starts shaking him while asking if the young man will accept. The boy mutters to himself that he really wanted to run away from there and soon mentions that he was a strong person who had been through many battles and was the best when it came to escaping. He places a hand on the girl's shoulder and informs Yoeo that he was sorry, but he already liked someone else. At that moment, we see that nearby, there was a girl saying the same thing. Our protagonist hears that and looks to the side to see what it was about, realizing that a girl was rejecting a boy. Basically the same situation he was going through, only with the genders reversed. Yoeo also notices this and pointing in that direction, asks if he was really going to use those old excuses, making Kiao even more desperate. The young man questions what the chances were of that happening at the same moment, and then his pink-haired friend asks what he's going to say. Still, he stands firm in his response and states that he likes someone. Pinning the boy against the wall, Yoeo demands to know who he liked, saying that if he did not say who it was, she would confess to him every day. The girl states that she will go to his house to confess, and regardless of the place, she will not give up, finally asking who he liked. Kiao asks himself why that girl was doing that and what he should do. But unwilling to give up, the young man states that the person he liked was Ning Yixu, who was possibly the girl rejecting the boy nearby. The pink-haired girl responds that if it was that girl, then it was fine, but upon hearing that, Bai is left confused. Yoeo states that the girl probably did not even know our protagonist and therefore they would not have a relationship. Additionally, that girl would be leaving the school next year, and she does not seem very concerned with that news. Then she once again pins Baikao against the wall. The young girl says that even if he does not like her now, she will try to make the boy fall in love in the future. With a sweet look, she says goodbye and says she will pick up the boy tomorrow morning. Baikao, completely confused by everything that happened before his eyes, is left completely frozen. Later at school, we see our protagonist murmuring as his idea went completely wrong until we see a girl approaching. We see that the person there is the student council president, Tang Xin, and she asks why he hasn't gone home yet. The girl, while drinking her coffee, violently sits down against the table beside him. With a seductive look, she inquires what Baikao was doing until that hour. Backing away in fear, Baikao simply responds that he voluntarily stayed to take care of council matters, even though he knew she was the one who ordered him to stay. While drinking from the cup she was holding, the young girl states that he is a good person. Right after, she offers the liquid in the cup to Baikao, mentioning that it was his reward for working late. Embarrassed, he promptly replies that it wasn't necessary as his mother said it was bad to drink coffee at night. Playing the victim, she asks if she was so kind to make coffee for the vice president even though he didn't like it. Feeling as if he had been counterattacked, our protagonist says that she was a very smart girl. Refusing the coffee once again, he says that he will certainly remember his president's kindness. Taking advantage of the situation, the girl states that she was sure Baikao would repay the favor, and at that moment, the boy sees another love letter on the table. Tang Xin asks the vice president what he thought about love. Hearing that while looking at the love letter on the table, the young man begins to question who had left the paper there. Tang moves even closer to our protagonist and says that he still hasn't answered her question. As she approaches his ear, she inquires what he thought about love letters. Tang Xin continues trying to seduce our protagonist, who starts questioning what was happening there. Suddenly, at that moment, a light saves the boy and knocks on the door can be heard while someone calls for the president. Seeing that there was no response, the girl asks if that meant Kiao wanted to receive a tighter hug. Baikao is confused, and the girl starts getting ready while stating that the vice president was very greedy. Once again, she hugs our protagonist tightly, trying to seduce him, and right after, she says that whoever was outside could come in. A boy with a love letter in his hand enters and comes across that strangely embarrassing scene. He apologizes and leaves while Baikao tries to stop him and explain what was happening, but it was already too late. Kiao realizes that in this way, that person will misunderstand everything, but the president simply states that the problem was solved. Our protagonist is very confused as that crazy girl called that a problem. Returning to normal and sitting down, the girl mentions that if the boy received 25 love letters in a month, he would understand why she did that. She says that he was the only boy she knew and had to make him responsible for it, and right after, Tang teases, saying that it would be basically impossible for the vice president to receive love letters. Our protagonist is not offended but seems irritated for being used as a scapegoat, while the girl playing with her phone continues drinking her coffee. Right after, suddenly with a smile on her face, the girl asks Bai to cover his eyes. She realizes that our protagonist didn't have the expected reaction and that he seemed confused. Trying to defend himself, the young man immediately questions what the girl was up to now. Taking the boy's hands, the white-haired girl asks if Cho was thinking that she was a pervert. After that, she places our protagonist's own hands over his eyes and states that she wasn't planning anything, she just wanted him to cover his eyes. At that moment, she orders the boy to cover his eyes well and not look under any circumstances. Our protagonist takes a small peek while stating that he had a bad feeling about this. However, the president says that if he dares to peek, things might get problematic there. She begins tying her hair up to make it easier to change her clothes. Right after, the young girl starts putting her clothes on inside out. Even though he is confused, Bei turns away to really avoid seeing anything at all. The president continues as she takes off her school uniform and ends up dropping her skirt. Cho, more confused than ever, questions what his president was doing and what that noise had been. She approaches our protagonist and says it was nothing. The young girl continues finishing dressing and then pulls our protagonist by the collar. She orders him to open his eyes and we see that the girl was wearing a beautiful dress. Tang asks what he thinks about it and inquires if it looked good on her. Kia responds that yes, she looked beautiful, but he asks why she changed clothes in the office since someone could have seen her. Tang simply lets go of him and states that she was in a hurry because there would be a dinner at her house that night. Additionally, she mentions that she didn't change in the office as the dress she was wearing could be hidden under her school uniform. So she just took off her uniform, and when she was about to show what she had done, our protagonist asks her to stop and not explain anything else. Embarrassed by everything, the young man states that he thought his president was in a hurry and asks why she was taking so long. For some reason, something comes to Tang's mind and the girl says she almost forgot something. As she approaches our protagonist, she calls for him. The young girl crouches down while stating that the vice president was really careless since, as a council member, he shouldn't be so sloppy and leave his button undone. After adjusting Kyo's shirt, placing a brooch where the button should be, she states that he looked much better, and our protagonist asks when his button had fallen off. Before leaving, she says that was an extra reward for him volunteering for overtime. Finally, she says she is leaving and tells him to be good and finish the extra work, while Kao tries to recover from everything that happened. As she walks toward her destination, the president seems happy, and we see that in reality, she had taken Kyo's shirt button. Walking back to the desk, Bei thinks that the letter wasn't from the president, so he wanted to know who it was from. Upon opening it, he sees a note from a girl calling him to go to the neighborhood cafe signed by Ning Ye. After reading the name Ning, Bai immediately sits down in desperation, thinking that she was the queen of their school. In another room, we see a black-haired girl we've seen before asking if, according to today's horoscope, there was another confession. Sometime later, we see our protagonist sitting across from Ning Ye. As he finishes drinking some coffee, Bai asks why Miss Ning called him there. The girl responds that Yo-Yo came to see her today and the reason was for them to talk about the fact that Bai Kao liked her. Additionally, the girl mentions that Yo-Yo gave a detailed explanation of the boys' flaws and the reasons why they couldn't be together. Our protagonist is very surprised, spitting out his coffee, and then immediately tries to explain, saying that it wasn't what his senior was thinking. Calmly, Ning assumes that it was just a random excuse for Bai to reject Yo-Yo. The young man responds that it was exactly that and thanks her for understanding, thinking that this was the power of a super intelligent and talented girl. Immediately, the boy apologizes for using the fact that he liked her as a shield, and then says he hopes she forgives him. As she closes the book, a young girl says she wanted to ask the boy something, and then she asks if Bai Kao would like to date her. As if his system had crashed, the young man becomes completely confused and says that she must be joking. Ning, however, says she wasn't and states that actually she just wanted him to pretend to be her boyfriend. Bai seems confused, and Ning adds that if Yo-Yo confesses to him, she won't give up until she is rejected, but without a plausible reason, the boy wouldn't be able to do it. That's why she had the idea of them pretending to be a couple, as it would be the best way to make others give up, and Kyo asks if that person from before didn't give up on Ning. The girl sighs and says that actually her situation was a bit more complicated than his. She stands up and before leaving says that it was just a suggestion and that he shouldn't worry too much, just think about it. Before leaving, she states that at this time, the day after tomorrow, she will be there waiting for the boy's answer. The next day, we hear an alarm ringing in someone's house. A girl approaches our protagonist while turning off the alarm. Wearing a cat-themed outfit, she climbs onto the young man's bed and for some reason, starts sniffing him while making cat-like sounds. Upon waking up, Bai Kao comes across this scene and is quite startled. He immediately questions why his sister was dressed like that so early in the morning and what she was doing there. Kiao even states that he went to bed last night without taking a shower and that he was smelly, but the girl responds that she likes his panda eyes. After that, the boy apologizes for yelling and getting scared. However, his sister replies that it's fine, and while sniffing him, she praises him. Our protagonist gets out of bed and heads toward his bathroom, stating that he won't play with her and that he's going to brush his teeth. While brushing his teeth, the young man questions how long his sister will keep holding on, and the girl seems unwilling to let go. Suddenly, she says a phrase with a meaning not very appropriate for siblings. Upon hearing this, Bai Kiao shouts for her not to say things with double meanings, but his sister responds that he has been too cold lately. Soon after, we see our protagonist's sister dressed as a maid serving him. Then she says that the breakfast, made with sisterly love, was ready. While Kiao eats, the girl asks if he likes it, and the young man praises the food. Immediately after, he tells his sister that he wants to talk about something, then asks if, when she was in school, it was common for people to confess to her. Upon hearing this, the girl becomes very embarrassed and responds that actually yes. Desperate, Kiao stands up and asks how she usually rejected confessions. He also asks what she did if the person didn't give up even after she turned them down. More embarrassed than ever, the girl responds that she always said she had a boyfriend, and if they still didn't believe her, she would show them a picture of her brother. Leaving the room, the young girl says she is late and will head to school first, reminding the boy to wash the dishes. Pensive, Bai realizes that this really was the only way. Outside, we see Yoeo dressed neatly, wondering why her friend hadn't come out yet. At that moment, she notices that Bai is finally leaving through the doors of his building. Kiao, immediately upon stepping out, comes across Yoeo and is quite startled to see that she wasn't lying and actually came to pick him up. He says that she arrived early while trying to leave immediately. As he runs, he thinks that dressed like that, Yoeo must be planning to resolve her rejection by force. But at that moment, the girl starts chasing after him. Aggressively, the pink-haired girl delivers a flying kick to our protagonist's back. She orders the boy to stay still immediately while choking him with his own tie, and Kiao wonders what kind of romantic comedy his life has turned into. Sometime later, we see Bai Kiao saying that this was just a small event from the city's archery club, and that there was no need for Yoeo to drag him like that. Irritated, while pulling our protagonist, the girl says she went through a lot to get the boy away from council work and go on a date with him, but the young man remains indifferent. At that moment, we see a boy surrounded by people. The boy, even with several girls around him, notices Yoeo's approach and waves at her. Completely irritated, the pink-haired girl says that guy is there again, and Bai Kiao looks confused, not recognizing him. At that moment, she starts acting completely differently, calling our protagonist darling and then asking for them to leave. Clinging to the young man's arm, the girl says that it was really sunny there, so they should go backstage, but our protagonist remains confused by all of this. Seeing that he wasn't playing along, whispers in his ear that if he didn't go along with the act, she would use him as a target at the archery club. Immediately after, she leaves saying that she is going to practice and that he should keep an eye on her bag. Fearing for his life, Bai replies that she should behave and that he would wait for her backstage. With a strange look, a blonde young man comments that, as always, Yoeo was cheerful. After that, he apologizes to the girls around him, but says that he will be stepping away for a bit. While our protagonist holds Yoeo's bag, the blonde approaches him and asks if he is Vice President Bai Kiao. The blonde introduces himself as Lin Gu, the captain of the Dundan School Archery Club, and mentions that Yoeo had talked about Kiao, but he didn't expect to meet him there. The boy thanks Kiao for bringing Yoeo there, but he says that since he invited the girl, he would naturally accompany her back after the meeting and that Kiao didn't need to bother. On the other hand, in his mind, Kiao thinks that guy was really cool, but there was something off about the stingy aura he emitted. In his head, Kiao also says that most likely the blonde was there to see Wu. The blonde continues trying to say that the vice president's time was valuable and that if he wasn't interested in the event, he could leave and he would explain it to Yoeo. However, Bai doesn't greet the boy and says that he was there as an invitee of the school's student council, and it wasn't his business who would be sending Yoeo back afterward. Besides that, it was also clear that who took Yoeo home wasn't Lin Gu's business either, and then the young man walks away. Feeling somewhat challenged, Lin Gu says that he thinks that guy is interesting, but it irritates him. We see that Yoeo was hiding behind a wall, and just by watching the scene, the girl smiles. Sometime later, we see the girl in the competition shooting a few arrows at the target. Tired of all of this, our protagonist wonders when the event will end while starting to doze off. Since he was holding his friend's bag but was falling asleep, he ends up dropping everything inside the bag onto the floor. Seeing the strange books that fell out, he wonders what Yoeo reads in her spare time. While picking up the fallen items, the young man hears some people talking. Chao hears a female voice saying that Witch was arrogant and narcissistic just because she got a pretty face. Lin Gu responds to the girl that they should let it go and pretend it was his fault. However, one of his followers comments that they couldn't ignore it and that the girl needed to be taught a lesson to learn how to behave properly. They continue flattering Lin Gu while our protagonist starts listening in on the conversation. Trying to maintain his appearance as someone extremely nice, Lin Gu tells the girls not to go after her because of him. Even so, they continue talking until Yoeo notices what our protagonist is doing and asks what's going on. Immediately, Bai asks the girl to leave him alone when he is eavesdropping on gossip, and the young girl questions if he was looking at other girls, but he responds that he wasn't. At that moment, the girl forces Bai Kiao to sit in a chair. She says that from now on, Bai can only look at her, and the young man, to avoid trouble, responds that he understands. As she sits beside him, Yoeo comments that he was really good today, so she will cooperate with him for a while. Showing her feet, she states that his reward will be putting socks on a beautiful girl, and after that, they will go home. With his friend's foot on his thigh, our protagonist seems quite uncomfortable. However, the pink-haired girl yells at him, saying that her feet were very clean and that he couldn't refuse this reward. Seeing her attitude, our protagonist thinks that Yoeo and the student council president practically had the same mindset. He tries to respond that he doesn't have such fetishes, but at that moment, the girl points her bow at him, and the boy is forced to comply. Xiao kneels in front of the girl and prepares to put on her socks. Feeling uncomfortable and embarrassed, he starts doing it, knowing he is being threatened. Right after finishing, he says that it was a pleasure to put socks on such a beautiful girl, and Yoeo responds that it was great he finally understood. However, This time, more sweetly, the girl rests her head on the boy's shoulder, thanks him, and says she was happy that he came with her. Our protagonist says that it seems like she and Lin-gu know each other well. However, upon hearing this, the girl becomes a little embarrassed. She immediately stands up and asks if the young man was really jealous. As we see a flashback from the previous day, Yoeo explains that Lin-gu was from another school, so they didn't talk much. But the day before, when they were setting up the stage for the event, the boy deliberately bumped into her and tried to hit on her. Because of that, full of anger, she slapped him. In reality, she doesn't know if he talked to anyone about it, but there were several people angry with her at the event. In his mind, our protagonist thinks that it's unbelievable that that scoundrel was dragging other people into this just for his own pride. However, before speaking to his friend Yoeo, Bai notices something strange when looking to the side and sees that the girl was sleeping against his shoulder. Seeing a sly little smile on her face, he considers the possibility that the young girl was just pretending to be asleep. We see that Yoeo was actually sneaking some peeks to see how Bai would react to all of this. However, Kiao suddenly grabs the girl's face as if he were about to kiss her. He brings his lips close to hers while the girl becomes extremely flustered but still seems to be pretending to be asleep. Our protagonist, seeing that she froze in embarrassment, gives up and then gently rests her head on the bag. Before he can leave, Yoeo shouts for him to stop immediately. The young man freezes against the wall, wondering what he just did wrong, while Yoeo kicks beside him. She asks if the boy knew nothing about a girl's heart, saying that when young man sees a girl sleeping, he should take her home. Embarrassed, Kiao asks which teenage magazine she got that from. Hearing that, Yoeo thinks that Kiao must have found out about her magazines. With teary eyes, she calls the boy an idiot and becomes very irritated. The girl turns away, stating that she was going back to change, still annoyed. She also orders Bai to go back to school alone, and the boy sighs. As he walks outside the event, he thinks that even though Lin-gu was lying to those girls, he should focus on himself. The boy states that at the very least, he needed to prevent those girls from causing trouble for his friend, but still, something felt off. Immediately, something clicks in his mind and he says that something about this wasn't right, since Lin-gu didn't do anything in front of him. The boy realizes that most likely the blonde was trying to make him leave so he could plot something. Sometime later, we see a group of 3 girls, with their leader being a blonde, questioning if Yoeo knew what was about to happen. The pink-haired girl asks what they wanted since she didn't remember knowing them. However, without giving her a chance to speak, the blonde girl immediately slaps Yoeo. The blonde says that now we must remember her and states that the slap was payback for Mr. Lin-gu. Yoeo wipes her cheek, which was hit, and immediately says that it was true that that piece of trash really liked gathering people. However, upon hearing her sweetheart being called trash, another girl grabs Yoeo by the collar. The pink-haired girl doesn't seem intimidated and says that, obviously, both that group of girls and that so-called Lin would ever work garbage. Completely outraged, the fanatic raises her hand, questioning how Yoeo dared to say that. However, at that moment, our protagonist arrives at the scene, grabbing the girl's arm and preventing her from delivering another slap. Bai Kiao asks if the girl really enjoyed being manipulated. However, breaking free, the blonde says that this was Mr. Lin-gu's matter, and that she simply loved handling his problems, which was none of Bai's business. After our protagonist gets slapped, the young man becomes furious, staring at the blonde with hatred. A little frightened, the girl questions why Bai was looking at her like that, and Yoeo realizes her friend's presence. Not wanting to cause trouble for her friend, she approaches Bai and says that he had nothing to do there. Quite sad, she says that the boy should have just left. Bai agrees and then immediately lifts the girl off the ground with both arms. Like a child being carried, Yoeo looks at her beloved in admiration. While crying, she simply nods, snuggling into the boy's arms. The blonde, on the other hand, doesn't want things to end there and asks if the two of them really thought they could just walk away. Sighing, Kao says that it was about time for Lin-gu to show up since things were already bad, and if they met later, it would only get worse. At that moment, Lin-gu appears, saying that he didn't even do anything, was just passing by. But like a rocket, our protagonist lands a full-force punch to that damn blonde's face, leaving everyone in shock. As he stares at Lin-gu on the ground, completely humiliated, Yoeo says that punch was her payback. Extremely irritated while taking a picture, the boy states that next time Lin-gu tries to pull something like this, he should think carefully, because otherwise everything he did would be exposed. Finally, Kao also says that he has surveillance footage of what Lin-gu did to Yoeo yesterday, so he should think about that, and Lin immediately agrees and apologizes. Yoeo, who didn't hear the conversation, asks what Bai had done while leaving with him. As she walks away beside her friend, Yoeo clings even more to the boy's arm, extremely happy with everything. In another place, we see our protagonist sitting on a staircase looking at a river. Suddenly, Wu arrives, offering him a can of soda, and the boy asks what that was about. Yoeo explains that the Coke was cold and that he could use it on his bruise, as it would be difficult to explain if people saw that slap mark on his face. Confused, Wu questions how the young man knew that she would be intimidated by those girls and that Lin-gu would be there. Our protagonist explains that the blonde played the victim. That way, he attracted some girls to take revenge on Yoeo by attacking her. Then, he would show up saving the damsel in distress, pretending to be some kind of storybook hero. As she gets closer to her beloved, the girl says that he was quite intelligent. With a sly look, she questions whether the boy was stealing the hero's spotlight from others. Bai moves even closer to Yoeo, and the girl seems confused. She backs away, startled, and asks what he meant. The young man says that the hero saved the damsel, but he wanted to know where the damsel he was supposed to save had gone. With a smile on her face, the girl says that since Bai was her hero, he would have to take responsibility for her because she would be following him. Sometime later, we see our protagonist washing some dishes while on his phone, Yoeo was sending multiple messages complaining about him leaving. Looking at those messages, Bai thinks that moment was extremely embarrassing and that if he hadn't left, he would have surely died. A figure approaches him. Suddenly, his sister, wearing only a towel, asks if the boy had been talking to other girls. Our protagonist immediately steps away and, knowing his sister well, responds that he wasn't and that it was just a discount notification from an online store. The towel-clad girl, fresh out of the bath, says that her brother's expression looked really suspicious. Another notification arrives and the two siblings lock eyes as if in a competition. Bai Lu keeps trying to grab her brother's phone while questioning why he was so nervous, but the boy, only defending himself, insists that it was nothing. After battling for some time, Bai Lu finally wins, snatches her brother's phone, and tells him to shut up. After entering the wrong password, the young girl becomes very irritated, realizing that her brother's password wasn't her birthday. Angry about this, she thinks she should teach him a lesson. The young girl gets off the boy and immediately says that it really was just an online store advertisement. However, she declares that her brother's phone would remain in her custody for now and starts placing the device between her oranges. She tries to hold the phone there, but because they were too small, the phone slips and falls to the ground. The two siblings stare at each other, not understanding what just happened. Bai Lu becomes extremely embarrassed and crouches down, feeling down. So to cheer her up, her brother suggests that they do something together. The girl immediately changes her expression and asks if he was sure. Having no choice, the boy tries to back out while sensing that something bad was about to happen. Sometime later, we see Bai Lu sitting on the sofa with her brother's head resting on her lap. Our protagonist, uncomfortable, questions whether this kind of thing was really appropriate between siblings and asks why the girl liked these things so much. She turns his face while stating that he had promised to do anything. Then she reveals that actually helping people clean their ears was very satisfying for her, which is why she wanted to do it for him. The young girl starts cleaning her brother's ear. A moment later, she leans in a little and ends up sighing into the boy's ear, making him slightly uncomfortable. Our protagonist, facing his sister's stomach, notices that her towel was beginning to slip off due to the breeze. The towel continues opening, revealing things that shouldn't be seen. He immediately calls for a timeout while lifting his head. The girl, after laying him back down, asks what was wrong, and he says that he was going to turn away because he needed to talk to one of the bad girls, and if his sister saw, she would get mad. Upon hearing that, Bai Lu becomes very annoyed and pulls her brother's cheek. Looking at the notification on his phone, he realizes that not only had Yoeo sent messages, but the student council president had as well. Completely frustrated by this, our protagonist tells his sister, Lulu, that he won't be going to school tomorrow, but the girl reminds him that tomorrow is Saturday. She realizes that her brother had completely forgotten that tomorrow was Saturday and leans in close to his ear. With overwhelming pressure, she says that this meant her brother forgot that her performance was the next day. However, the boy replies that he didn't. He states that he would never forget the city's young talent dance competition and that he had only forgotten that tomorrow was Saturday. Like a demon, the girl asks if he would come to watch her performance, and the boy promptly responds that he would be there. Happy, she hums a tune as she leaves, saying that was all for today, that she was going to bed, and that she would see him tomorrow. In his conversation with the president, Tang Xin asks if he had eaten yet and complains that he took too long to reply, even though he had already read the message. Our protagonist asks what she wanted, and she simply says that tomorrow was Saturday, so he responds that his president was always working hard. Because of that, he suggests that she take a break and that he would only see her again on Monday. However, the girl states that she will come to his house in the morning to play with him. Alarmed, our protagonist asks what she meant and thinks that if his sister saw the president coming over in the morning, something very bad could happen. The night passes and finally the morning arrives. On Baikyo's phone, his sister informs him that she was on stage and heading to rehearsal and that he shouldn't forget to come see her that night. The boy replies that everything was fine. Elsewhere, our protagonist thinks that he was smart enough to run to the nearest bookstore and manage to avoid the disaster that was about to unfold in front of his house. With a rather terrifying expression, he says that his entire plan worked perfectly. Suddenly, someone arrives, offering him coffee, and he promptly accepts it with a smile on his face. As he drinks, since everything had gone according to plan, Baikyo finally seems happy. However, he suddenly feels the weight of 2 melons on his shoulder and says that this felt familiar. We then see that the one who had given him coffee and was leaning on him was the president, who cheerfully greets him. In the same location, a woman can be seen frying some snacks. While eating one of them, our protagonist asks how the president knew that he would hide in the bookstore. The young girl also starts eating one of the fried snacks while asking if Baikyo knew why rabbits were so easy to catch. A bit uneasy with the situation, our protagonist asks why, and the girl begins to explain. She explains that in reality, rabbits are timid, and Baikyo asks what that has to do with anything. The girl informs him that as long as the hunter makes noise on one side, as soon as the rabbits hear it, they will run like crazy to the other side. At that point, a smart hunter only needs to learn a bit about the rabbit's habits and then set a trap. That way, the animal will naturally fall into the trap, and then she asks if Kyo doesn't agree with that. Finally, in a sensual tone, she calls our protagonist Little Bunny. Hearing that and realizing that the crazy girl was referring to him as a bunny, Kyo replies that the president was very intelligent, but he says that she wouldn't find a boyfriend acting like this. The girl with an imposing demeanor says that if there was someone she liked, that person wouldn't be able to escape her easily. Kyo wonders in his head where that white fox learned such strange things and also questions why she winked at him when she said that. Returning to reality, he asks why the president wanted to see him that day. The girl simply replies that she wanted to have fun with the vice president and, in addition, she wanted him to accompany her on a blind date. At that moment, our protagonist stands up, thanks her for the food, and says that suddenly, he started feeling a bit unwell and was going to leave. However, not letting the boy get away, Tang uses her leg to trip Kyo's heel and make him fall. As the young man stumbles backward, he tries to grab onto the nearest thing he sees. However, the president guides his ham straight to a pair of melons. Shamelessly, she asks why the vice president grabbed that place so boldly. Then, threatening him, she asks if he wanted her to scream that she was being harassed. Our protagonist, feeling Tang's leg pressing against his heel, says that the one actually being harassed here was him. While gently stroking the young man, she begins to slowly spell out Vice President. And upon finishing, she asks if the boy really wanted to try running away, as if she were holding onto her prey, the little bunny. Our protagonist, having no other choice, simply apologizes and says that suddenly he was feeling much better. Sometime later, she sits beside the boy and explains that this meeting was just to meet someone and that he didn't need to be so nervous. Kyo responds by asking if she knew how many people at school wanted to kill him just because she used him as a scapegoat, and that's why he didn't want to die this time. Suddenly, for some reason, the president begins to lower the strap holding her dress. She pulls something out of her clothing and asks if she will have to give it to the person she is meeting today. With shining eyes, Kyo realizes that it was Chunhu 4, a limited edition PlayStation 4 game. The young man replies that this game was supposed to be released in 3 months and asks how she got it. Ignoring the question, Tang says that Bae really likes that game and then asks what he was saying before. Apologizing and bowing, the boy begs the president to let him be her shield today, and the girl promptly accepts. Outside, as they walk, Kyo just asks Tang to tell him who they were meeting this time since he wanted to be prepared. The girl explains that this person had returned to the country, and his family's company was among the top 500, in addition to doing business with her family. And last time they had dinner, their relatives said they were the right age to meet, and since she had already refused many times, she couldn't decline again. Wanting to get rid of her, our protagonist asks why the vice president didn't go out with the guy instead. But she clings to him and responds that it wouldn't be good since she liked our protagonist too much and still wasn't tired of him. Completely embarrassed, the boy says that his president always says strange things like that. At that moment, a very familiar voice calls out to Bai Kyo, and the girl, surprised, says she didn't expect to find him there. Not at all comfortable with this, Tang continues hugging our protagonist. We then see that the owner of that familiar voice was Ning Yi, who says she didn't expect to see Bai there. The boy, startled, asks what Miss Ning was doing there, and she replies that she was just out for a stroll. The young girl takes 2 coupons out of her pocket and hands them to Bai, stating that she had forgotten to give them to him last time they met. She tells him not to forget to redeem the coupon on time, and then she says goodbye, commenting that she won't interrupt his date. Upon taking the coupons, he realizes that she was referring to the deadline to answer her proposal, and Kyo notices that the coupons expire that day. However, the boy thinks that besides the meeting with his president, he still had his sister's competition later that night. On the other hand, Tang Sin was irritated as she hadn't expected the boy to be so close to the school queen without her knowing. Wanting to speed things up, the young man starts pulling Tang Sin along, saying that he will help her with that meeting immediately. Sometime later, the two enter a restaurant and we see a black-haired young man calling for Tang Sin. The boy looks extremely surprised and asks the girl who the guy beside her was. Irritated and out of breath, Tang Sin complains in her head that Bag Kao ran way too fast. Trying to recover, she says that the boy almost made her forget the main point. Introducing our protagonist, the girl says that she had already mentioned him before and that she didn't expect to run into him along the way, so she invited him for a meal. The boy, even though he was annoyed, says that if Bai was Tang Sin's friend, then he was his friend too, so he didn't mind. Right after, he says that it was a pleasure to meet our protagonist. Tang Sin thinks that the vice president is truly an idiot since he was obviously there as her fake boyfriend, yet he was casually chatting with her rival. Wanting to break the friendly atmosphere, the young girl picks up a piece of food with her hands and asks Bai to look at her. She says that the boy shouldn't just keep talking and should eat something. Then she states that after dinner, it will still have a lot of fun, and the young man simply responds that it was great to hear that. Frustrated to see the woman he desired so much with another man, Shen Yu realizes that the two were really close and says that this was supposed to be his date. Then, irritated, the boy tells himself that he will have to take drastic measures. He approaches Bai Kao and says that it was a great pleasure to meet him, then asks why they don't have some drinks while they continue talking. The young man also mentions that this restaurant is well known for its wine collection, and without Bai Kao noticing, Chen Yu slips his own wallet into the boy's pocket. Bai Kao responds that he wasn't very good with alcohol, but Chen just insists that he should give it a try. Hearing this, Tang Sin imagines herself drinking and thinks that if she pretends to be drunk, she could throw herself into our protagonist's arms, and that would be amazing. Additionally, Chen would get really annoyed and realize that he didn't belong there. She immediately agrees, saying that they couldn't pass up such good wine and suggests to Bai that they drink a little. Tang convinces the boy to have a bit, saying that she had never seen him drink before, and seeing all this, Chen seems pleased. Sometime later, they toast, and Tang Sin thinks that as soon as she takes a sip, she will pretend to be drunk. But when she looks to the side, she immediately notices that our protagonist is completely intoxicated. Chen says that it's a shame and asks why Bae didn't say he was weak to alcohol since he went ahead and bought a whole bottle. Then he suggests that they take the boy home. Tang Xin, completely irritated, refuses and states that she wasn't interested in talking to Chen until her friend was okay. Even though he's annoyed, Yu agrees and says he will pay the bill first. Completely drunk, Bai Qiao clings to the president and says that she smells nice. The girl questions what her friend was saying and asks if he could stand on his own. However, she immediately realizes that the boy's legs were trembling. Standing up with the help of his colleague, the boy says that he couldn't stand anymore, and Tang Xin is quite pleased with this situation. However, the wallet that Chen had intentionally placed in our protagonist's pocket starts to fall out. At that moment, the schemer arrives, asking if anyone had seen his wallet as it had gone missing. Picking up his fallen wallet, the young man asks how it ended up there. Chen starts incriminating our protagonist, saying that it seemed like his wallet had just fallen out of Tang's friend's pocket. Then he sits down and says that stealing was a crime, asking if Bai Qiao wasn't a law-abiding citizen. However, Qiao is completely drunk and asks if the guy's wallet had been stolen. He gets up and says that it's fine, that Chen can keep looking for his wallet because he will pay for everything. But Yu responds that he didn't ask the boy to pay, and since he wouldn't admit to stealing, he was going to call the police. Tang Xin says that this was too much and tells Chen that he would embarrass himself if he kept acting like this. With a cunning expression, the young man simply says that his wallet fell out of Qiao's pocket and that this corrupt guy wasn't worthy of his status. Besides, he had seen plenty of thieves like Qiao before, and there was no way Tang Xin could defend him. But at that moment, the boy is hit with wine. Tang Xin finishes throwing all the wine from her glass on him and asks if he was sober now or if he was still going to continue with that performance. The girl places her foot on the table and asks Chen who he thought he was. The president states that she didn't care what Chen thought about her or what he told her family. As long as it didn't affect her life, she didn't care. However, if he messed with Bai Qiao, especially in that way, she wouldn't go easy on him. And with a terrifying expression, she says that she was glad she found out early about this because she guarantees that something bad will happen if he doesn't stop his act. Chen, completely humiliated and embarrassed, says that he understands. Tang sets her wine glass down on the table and hugs Qiao, who is still drunk. She apologizes, saying that all of this was her fault. Then she helps the boy leave the restaurant. Sometime later, we see that our protagonist is lying down, sleeping with his head resting on the president's lap on a park bench. Startled and not understanding where he is, he asks what time it is. The girl promptly responds that it's 4 in the afternoon, and Qiao seems alarmed. Bai states that he was late for the show, and that was really bad. However, immediately the white-haired girl smacks Qiao's head with her fan and says that she was joking. She states that the vice president is too easily influenced by what others say, which is why he almost got framed just now. Tang explains that almost everything went wrong because Chen was a scammer, but now everything was fine and Bai shouldn't trust people who wear masks and smile, including her. Too embarrassed to look his colleague in the face, the boy simply averts his gaze slightly and then thanks her for her help. Practically pressing Bai Qiao's head into her melons, the girl begins to speak. While smothering the boy, she says that since he was a loser, he would have to repay her and help her out. But immediately, our protagonist stands up and says that it was getting late and that he was heading to the theater to watch the show. Finn once again clings to him and asks if they were taking the subway. However, already prepared for that situation, Qiao responds that he only had 1 ticket. But Tang Xin shows 2 VIP tickets and says that everything was fine. Our protagonist asks why the girl had those, and she explains that this was the reason she had called him. Since she knew the boy had a cute little sister who was a ballet dancer, she thought Bai Qiao might be interested in it. Then she asks if they should go together, and Bai Qiao agrees. But he questions why the girl had placed her arm over his back, and the girl replies that she had to help the drunk vice president. Immediately, the boy responds that he was already sober, and Tang Xin simply says that's what drunk people always say. Sometime later, we see the girl taking off her high heels while asking the boy to wait a moment. She says that wearing them all day was really exhausting and prepares to step onto the ground. Now walking barefoot, the young girl states that she feels much better. However, our protagonist seems a little uncomfortable with the situation as he stares intently at the girl's feet. She asks what her vice president was looking at so much and wonders if he had ulterior motives. Sometime later, we see a theater with some ballerinas dancing. Several people in the audience were watching the show, including our protagonist and his companion. Tang Xin seems a little bored as she thought she would be able to uncover some of the vice president's secrets, but she got nothing. She even recalls the moment when our protagonist got worried about her walking barefoot and offered his own shoes. And looking at Bai Qiao, who seemed to be trembling, she says that the boy was an idiot. Then she pokes the boy's face and tells him not to be so nervous since the one on stage was his sister, not him. In the middle of the performance, Bai Qiao seems to notice something. Staring at his sister, he realizes that something was very wrong. Our protagonist sees that the dress his sister was wearing started to come apart out of nowhere. The stitches holding parts of the girl's dress together begin to snap, causing an interruption in the show. Everyone in the audience starts wondering what was happening, while Bai Qiao becomes very alarmed. On the other hand, a blonde-haired girl who was watching the scene seems pleased with what was happening. Sometime later, the announcer begins to announce the winner of the competition, while we see our protagonist's sister taking off her ballet tights. The girl seems very sad, and as she looks at a piece of paper, Bai Lu continues to have a completely disheartened and disappointed expression. Rushing to the scene, Bai Qiao arrives, asking if everything was okay. Immediately, Bai Lu throws herself into her brother's arms, hugging him as he says that she was there all alone. Crying, Bai Lu says that all her efforts were in vain, and Bai Qiao tries to comfort her, saying that he is sorry. He gently strokes her head and tells her that she did her best. At that moment, Tang Sin also arrives, saying that Bai Kyo's sister was amazing and that only the stage equipment didn't help. Additionally, she mentions that Kyo was really worried. However, still hugging her brother, Bai Lu asks the old fox how she got there, and the young girl replies that she was accompanying the vice president, who came to see his little sister. They continue arguing for a moment as Bai Lu didn't like being called little sister by her. Watching this, Bai Kyo wonders why those two girls didn't get along as things were getting completely out of control. Seeing the scene, the boy says that it reminded him of the first time those two met. At that moment, Bai Lu grabs her brother's hands and says that they should go home since that place was full of dangerous people. She says that our protagonist could even be eaten alive and then makes a face at Tang Sin. However, Tang clings to Bai Kyo's arm and says that his little sister shouldn't act like that since she was very good to Bai. After that, the girl asks if the vice president agreed with her, and upon seeing this, Bai Lu immediately disagrees with the situation. Wanting to calm everything down, our protagonist says that the president was very good to him and that they were all together, after all, so they should get along and live peacefully without fighting. However, seeing Tang Sin's strange closeness to her brother, the girl immediately tries to separate them. She shouts that they shouldn't be holding hands and finally breaks Tang Sin's embrace. Completely pouting and with a cute expression, she declares that her brother was only hers until, at that moment, a blonde-haired girl appears. Very excited, she was happy to have found Lulu. She lifts Bai Lu while saying that they were amazing since they placed fourth and could work together again next year. However, Bai Lu doesn't look very happy. The blonde looks at our protagonist and asks if he was Lulu's brother, then immediately states that her friend always ignores her just to talk to him. Additionally, the blonde also says that her friend Lulu used to call Chow a certain something, but she keeps forgetting the word. At that moment, Tang Sin says the word scoundrel, and the blonde immediately shouts that it was true. Bai Lu always called her own brother a scoundrel. Bai Lu immediately tells her friend Wu Qiao to shut up and stop saying such nonsense, and drags the girl away so she can change into another outfit. Tang Sin notices that Wu Qiao was probably part of the support team, and for some reason, that raises a suspicion in her mind. The girl asked our protagonist if he knew why his sister had left the show, but our protagonist doesn't really understand her logic. A little while later, we see Bai Lu informing her brother that she was going to change. She asked the boy to wait for her, and at that moment, we see that our protagonist was sitting next to Wu Xiao. In his head, the young man thinks that despite everything, the president's words actually made some sense. In a flashback, we see the president saying that it was probably Wu Xiao who tampered with Lulu's costume since, even as a team member, she didn't seem upset about the loss. Our protagonist looks at Wu, who gives him a confused look back, not understanding why Kyo was watching her. He seems extremely nervous, not knowing how he would solve that mystery, until Kyo breaks the ice and asks if the boy was worried about Lulu's performance. Our protagonist responds that he was, since it was really bad to end up in fourth place after working so hard for so many months, and he felt bad for his sister. Kigao regains his composure and asks if it was her who checked the team's outfits, and the girl seems nervous about that sudden question. Playing dumb, the young girl responds that this batch of dance costumes had already been checked, but she had no idea how it had torn. Seeing that strange reaction, the boy thinks that something wasn't right, raising even more suspicion. Suddenly, a call comes to his phone, and the person calling was Yo Yao. Extremely irritated, she asks why the hell he wasn't replying to her messages and where he was right now. After answering, our protagonist responds that he was at the theater, and outraged, the girl asks if he went alone or if he was with another girl. Seeing an opportunity to deceive Xiao and solve the mystery, the young man starts talking to Yao Yao as if he were responsible for the theater. On the other hand, the pink-haired girl who was in the bath seems very confused by the situation and asks if the boy was okay. Our protagonist ignores the question and simply says that since his sister's outfit had been torn, he would have to call the police. However, at that moment, afraid of being exposed, Xiao asks the boy to please wait for a moment. With teary eyes, she tugs on the boy's shirt and admits that she was the one who did it. On the other end of the line in her bathtub, Yo Yo was more confused than ever and asks what the boy was talking about calling the police. She wonders if this was some kind of secret code and questions whether Bai Kao had been kidnapped by a criminal. Yo Yo gets out of the bath and wraps herself in a towel while saying that her time has finally come. Finally, she states that this was the perfect moment to be a heroine, save her love, and repay his help. However, she realizes that if she tries to save the boy alone, she might end up getting caught as well. Looking at her phone in front of the mirror, the girl tries to come up with an idea. Suddenly, after thinking so much, something finally comes to her mind and she thinks of a plan. Sometime later, our protagonist questions whether Xiao really said that her sister swore she would stop dancing if she at least reached third place in this competition. And finally, he questions whether, to prevent her from stopping dancing, Xiao switched her skirt, and the girl promptly responds that she did. She apologizes and says that she was only trying to encourage Lulu to keep dancing, but she was too selfish. Even so, disappointed, our protagonist thinks that this kind of reasoning was too stupid and says that it is hard to trust the girl. However, Xiao places her hands on the boy's shoulders and asks if he also hopes that Lulu can hold on to her dream and keep dancing. The girl states that she loves Bai Lu so much for fighting for her dream of dancing that she did everything she could to help her continue. Xiao asks if Bai knew why the girl wanted to stop dancing, and then she reveals that it was obvious. The reason Lulu wanted to stop dancing was because of her brother. Whether he was the mischievous brother or the one who did his best, it didn't matter what kind of brother he was. He was the brother Lulu loved so much. In other words, to keep up with her brother and have more time to take care of him, Lulu chose to stop dancing since in her heart only her brother existed. The young woman also reveals that when she confessed to Bai Lu, the reason she was rejected was because of her brother, and our protagonist realizes that it was Xiao whom Lulu rejected. Finally, the blonde concludes that being her brother, Bai Qiao also knows about the girl's interest in dancing. And before leaving, she asks if the boy is really okay with his sister giving up on her dreams. Sometime later, we see a storm falling from the sky as Qiao carries his sister on his back. The boy says that her day was tiring and that if she was exhausted, she could rest a little, but Lulu refuses, as if she sleeps, she won't be able to hold the umbrella for him. After that, he says that he heard that the girl didn't want to dance anymore, and because of that, he asks if she won't regret it when she grows up for giving up on her dreams. However, after hearing that, Bai Lu asks who said that because she was not going to give up, and confused, our protagonist says that Xiao had told him that the girl was going to quit. Immediately, after thinking for a moment, our protagonist's sister denies it and says she is not going to quit anymore. She explains that she will still surpass that woman so that her brother can be proud of her. And finally, with a cute expression, she says that Lulu will not give up. Upon hearing that his sister was referring to a woman, the image of a girl with her face covered comes to his mind, and our protagonist seems confused. While remembering a tragic moment, our protagonist says that time never changes anything and that he just watches from the sidelines. The young man mentions that 2 years have passed and that he no longer felt the same way about that girl's departure. However, even so, the pain was always in his memories, and in fact, that was why he no longer wanted to accept confessions. Bai Lu realizes that her brother is starting to get sad and becomes irritated by that. She pulls the boy's cheek and says that she just mentioned that evil woman, and even so, her brother missed her again. Qiao replies that no, that in fact, he was just thinking about what they were going to eat that night, but the girl remains suspicious. The young man says that it was kind of childish for Lulu to choose to dance to surpass that girl, and that his sister was such a little child that she had not yet matured. However, Bai Lu immediately replies that she did not dance because of that evil woman. She reveals that, in fact, it was because of the story of a life hanging by a thread that her brother told, but the boy does not seem to remember that. But suddenly, he remembers that it had been a while and that it was a story he had told. In a flashback, we see our young protagonist watching Ultraman. Little Bai Lu asks her brother to stop watching that and play with her. Their mother tells Bai Lu that it's time for her to get ready for dance class. An idea comes to our protagonist's mind. He asks if his sister has ever heard about the story of a life hanging by a thread, and the girl looks confused. Then, in the present, our protagonist tells himself that back then, he just wanted to get rid of that little kid and casually learn some mature words to convince her to go to dance class. However, he didn't expect the girl to actually take that as a motto for the rest of her life and start practicing fiercely. In the end, he states that, after all, it was him who forgot how it all began. A little sulky, she says that her brother knows the main goal of the company is to provide the best possible service to customers, and that this phrase was a reference. They continue talking about the memories of the cartoon while the girl accuses him of only having Ultraman in his heart. The two notice a car approaching and immediately look back. The vehicle, before crashing, manages to turn but ends up splashing some water on them. The siblings immediately realize it and see that they're about to get wet. Lulu quickly grabs her umbrella to try to shield them from the incoming water. However, worried, our protagonist steps in front, preventing the girl from doing so, and takes the entire splash of water himself. Shortly after, the girl asks if her brother is okay, and the boy replies that he is. At home, she says that she obviously had an umbrella to block the water and asks why he turned to get wet, calling him annoying right after. While his sister dries his head, the girl says that her wish was to take care of him, but all she does is cause him trouble. And in fact, that's why she argued with Xiao about quitting dance. But Qiao says that, as her older brother, the first thing he should do is take care of her. Right after, he scolds her, saying that she couldn't quit dancing since she finished in 4th place in the competition and still had a lot to learn. Annoyed, the girl retorts that our protagonist has been learning a lot from that old fox, and that he's gotten really cunning. Qiao just laughs. Bai Lu notices that her brother is also a little wet, and then says she's going to clean him up. The young man replies that she doesn't need to bother since he can do it himself. But without letting the boy think, she pushes him onto the bed and starts drying him. Right after, she says she wanted to check if her brother had been working out his abs lately and begins lifting his shirt. However, a memory suddenly comes to Bai Qiao's mind, and the boy realizes he completely forgot about Senior Ningye. Sometime later, he arrives at the cafe, shouting for Miss Ning, wanting to know if she was there. The woman, without showing any surprise, asks if the matters our protagonist had to resolve were settled. Confused, the boy asks his senior how she knew he had things to take care of. She then shows her phone, and several messages from Yao Yao can be seen, who was completely worried about the boy. Desperate, the pink-haired girl was swearing that our protagonist had been kidnapped and asking why he wasn't answering. Ningyi explains that Yao Yao thought the boy had been kidnapped and was wondering if she should call the police. However, she managed to calm the girl down by saying she would take care of it. Remembering his sister and the vice president, the boy thinks that if he doesn't handle the situation properly, he fears the mess will get even worse. Besides that, there was that person, and then he remembers that woman from before once again. After sitting down with his senior, he starts talking about the proposal Ning Yi had previously made to him about pretending to be a couple. The woman elegantly asks our protagonist what his decision was. We see Yao Yao waiting for someone while leaning against the wall until she hears the creaking sound of wood. Our protagonist comes face to face with a pink-haired girl, and they exchange glances. Bagkyo gets quite nervous since the girl had arrived very early, but she says she doesn't know what he's talking about since they just happened to meet by chance. She grabs the boy's arm and says she wants to ask him something. Curious, Yo-Yo asks what the boy did after meeting with Ning and why he wasn't answering her calls. Our protagonist tries to come up with an explanation while in his head, he remembers his conversation with Ning. The girl lets go of Kiao and goes to her bag saying that she already understood what happened yesterday and that our protagonist must have a bunch of fetishes. She pulls out a rope and some handcuffs while saying that she prepared those for him. As she stretches the rope as if about to hit our protagonist, she asks if they should try it out. On the other hand, Kiao questions when she even learned these things. The girl shows an adult magazine while claiming that she learned most of it by reading that, but she also picked up a few tricks on her own. Trying to get out of the situation, Bae says he forgot something and immediately runs away. Running around the school, Yo-Yo asks why the boy is running away. As she chases our protagonist, Yo-Yo keeps shouting that running won't help him escape. At that moment, we see Ning simply watching the situation unfold. Looking out the window, the girl sees the complicated scene and sighs, pitying what Kiao was going through. Sometime later, Kiao finally manages to lose his pursuer, and Yo-Yo continues searching for the boy through the bushes. She yells that she won't let him escape again if she finds him, while we see that our protagonist is actually in the classroom. A message arrives on his phone, and when he picks up his smartphone, he realizes someone is calling. While painting her nails, the student council president asks her vice president how his weekend was. The boy replies that thanks to her, he was able to enjoy it quite a bit, but in reality, he thinks that because of that sly fox, he'll have to eat cassava made by Lulu all week. The white-haired girl says that since he was doing so well, he could accompany her to the tennis club to take care of some matters. Tan also says she'll reward him with a delicious coffee, but our protagonist starts pretending that the call is cutting out and that he can't hear her. The boy says he thinks the signal dropped and keeps repeating hello to try to fool her. The white-haired girl calls someone named Laren Jinha and asks if she could help her find out which classroom Bai Kiao will be in later. Shenwei, the head of the student union of the management department and nicknamed Laren Jinha, promptly agrees. While erasing what was written on the board, our protagonist thinks that his school life is in the middle of a crisis and everything is repeating itself. Suddenly, someone places a hand over his, and the boy once again questions what is happening. He realizes that once again, something straight out of a romantic comedy is happening in his life. In reality, we see that the one who did it was Ning Yi, who asked the boy if Yo-Yo is chasing him again. Our protagonist asks how she knows, and the girl says that since they made a deal yesterday, they should start taking advantage of the fake relationship. And in doing so, make all those misunderstandings disappear. Looking at our protagonist's hair, Ning Yi notices a small speck of dust and decides to clean it. She gently moves closer to the boy, standing on her tiptoes to reach his hair. At that moment, the student council president arrives in the room, saying she was waiting for Bai Kiao. But before she can finish her sentence, she sees the scene, misunderstands it, and ends up dropping all the papers in her hands. Yo-Yo also enters the room, very happy and ready to bother Kiao. The pink-haired girl approaches Tang Sin while beginning to talk to our protagonist. However, she also sees the scene and is completely shocked and startled. The two girls see Ning Yi very close to Bai Kiao, as if they were kissing. And with such an embarrassing sight, both are completely stunned. The two girls remain in shock for a while, staring at the scene. Yo-Yo becomes quite irritated, while the president couldn't even believe what was happening before her eyes. Ning continues cleaning our protagonist's hair, saying that he was covered in dust. She gets even closer to the boy while asking him to lower himself a little so she can get a better look. Wu is completely heartbroken, and her eyes well up with tears as she watches the scene. She immediately runs off, letting out a small sob. The president, on the other hand, tries to stay composed while saying that this was very suspicious. However, she gathers the papers she dropped and apologizes for disturbing them. The girl immediately runs off while our protagonist is startled by what he just saw. Yi apologizes, saying that after asking him to lower his head a bit, she thought she heard Yao Yao outside, which might have caused some embarrassment. Our protagonist responds that it's fine, as it's actually better this way since he was worried about how to tell Yao Yao about their fake relationship. The young woman asks the boy to accompany her to the literature club since there were still some things she wanted to confirm. On the way, a white-haired boy arrives, calling for President Ning Yi. The boy seems quite shocked to see that the student council's vice president was also there. Right after, he says he would like to speak with Ning Yi personally about some problems they were having in the literature club. Our protagonist looks at his senior, considering whether it's better for him to leave and let them talk privately. However, she has an extremely confident expression, waiting for our protagonist to handle the situation, leaving him quite confused by her gaze. He finally understands and steps in front of Ning Yi, saying that since it was about the club, he didn't believe they needed to discuss it in private and that they could talk openly. The boy retorts that this was the literature club and asks who Kyo thinks he is, saying that just because he's on the council doesn't mean he can tell them what to do. Ning Yi, on the other hand, reveals that besides being the student council's vice president, Chao is also her boyfriend, and upon hearing this, the white-haired boy is left in shock. Our protagonist and his fake girlfriend continue walking through the hallways, leaving the boy completely shaken. Devastated and heartbroken, the boy kneels, unsure of what to do. While walking behind Ning, Bai Kiao asks if she thinks that Guy will tell other people about what just happened. Surprising our protagonist, the girl turns around and apologizes for her actions, leaving the boy extremely startled. She admits that she made a fool of herself, but Bai replies that it's fine and that, in fact, that guy will spread the news, which is good for their plan. Ning agrees and sighs but reveals that, in reality, there was still one person who would keep bothering her despite the rumors spreading. Shortly after, while pulling out a chair to sit, the girl asks if Bai has ever thought about how couples behave when they're together. She says that just walking around together won't convince everyone, so she suggests that he join the literature clubs so they can spend more time together, and he agrees. Embarrassed, the girl also prepares to say something else but hesitates for a moment. Ning then reveals that she has been reading about emotional connections for couples and saw on an app that couples need to leave their marks on each other. Blushing, she asks if they could try it. Upon hearing about this app, Bai wonders if people are still trying to teach others how to love. At that moment, Ning moves closer to the boy, placing her hand on his neck and leaning against him. In an extremely cute and friendly manner, she asks him to lower his head a little. She also asks him not to move as she brings her lips closer to our protagonist's neck. Yixu ends up kissing the boy's neck, leaving him completely flustered. After leaving a lipstick mark with her kiss, she says it's all set. Right after, she states that, in this case, it will seem much more real if he walks around with that mark. Watching this, Bai comments that the girl is quite meticulous and considerate. After that, as she sits down, the young woman reveals that she needs to take care of some things now and asks if, from the next day on, they could go to school together. Even though he's completely embarrassed by the proposal, the young man seems happy and agrees. While walking outside the school, our protagonist wonders why he's thinking about this. He realizes that joining the literature club and being the vice president of the student council would be problematic, as the president would probably see it as betrayal and kill him. The young man states that he wanted to solve one problem, but now he has a new one, saying that he just wanted to live like a normal guy. But suddenly, a girl approaches him. Yo-Yo calls out to Bai Kyo, surprising the boy and making him nervous. She quickly appears out of nowhere, throwing herself in front of the boy and demanding that he stop. With an angry expression, she states that she needs to ask him something. Sometime later, we see an attendant handing an ice cream cup to Bai Kyo, and the young man thanks them. The boy walks toward Yo-Yo, who was sitting on a step of the stairs. For some reason, Kyo seemed quite reluctant, looking at the girl without knowing how to interact. He approaches and tries to hand her the ice cream, and afraid of hurting her feelings, he asks if she was on a diet that day. The girl doesn't even respond and just grabs the ice cream, completely furious about everything. She gently asks when his relationship with Ning began. The boy shamelessly replies that it was yesterday, and Yo-Yo asks if that was what he was dealing with the day before, which made him ignore her messages. Not knowing exactly how to respond, Kyo just looks quite apprehensive. The pink-haired girl says she has Ning's contact and asks if Kyo isn't afraid that she might tell the girl they had been hanging out. Our protagonist simply replies that his girlfriend is a very understanding person and probably wouldn't get upset about it. On the other hand, the pink-haired girl seems quite irritated by that and turns to her ice cream. While stirring the vanilla dessert, she asks if Chao really likes Ning, and the boy replies that he had already mentioned before that he liked Yixu. The girl responds that she knew that, but she was sure he deserved someone better than her. Struggling with his words and confused, our protagonist replies that Ning called him a reliable person, and that was already enough for him. Yo-Yo, with a loving tone, responds that she also thought that about Kyo. She says that when she met the boy in that place years ago, she believed in that. However, before we can see a flashback, the girl cuts the scene, saying they should drop it since it was much better not to talk about it now. Quite saddened by the sunset, Yo-Yo asks if, in the future, the one who will sit by his side and eat ice cream with him will be Ning. Showing her darker side, she begins to cry while questioning herself about who she was trying to fool. She reveals that she was talking to the person she loved most in her life, and that, in reality, she was the one who wanted to be by his side. The young girl admits that she wanted to sit with our protagonist, and the boy seems quite uneasy hearing all of this. At that moment, Yo-Yo takes one of her hair ribbons, which had fallen from her hair, and asks Kyo to tie it for her. The boy agrees and asks the girl to lower her head a little, and she does so while our protagonist proceeds. But as he ties the girl's ribbon, our protagonist gets a reality check and realizes something unexpected in his mind. The boy, in his thoughts, acknowledges that he wasn't the right person to be doing this now because he had rejected Yo-Yo. After tying the ribbon, he asks if it's too tight while sighing somewhat uneasy. Yo-Yo, still devastated by everything that was happening, replies that it is a little. Remembering all the times our protagonist had done this, she asks if this would be the last time he would tie her ribbon. The boy, though reluctant, responds that it was very likely, and Yo-Yo takes his hand, stating afterward that of course it was always hard to go out with him. Crying, she says that she always looks forward to eating ice cream with him, but the boy had broken up with her, and she didn't want to let him go just like that. Completely heartbroken, the girl lets out wails as she cries, extremely frustrated with our protagonist. She buries herself in his chest while telling him to go to hell and calling him stinky, and right after that, she says that if she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have liked him. Watching the scene, our protagonist says that in the end, Yo-Yo broke down. However, when someone cries like that near him, he never knows how to respond. Still, he knows that letting it all out was a relief for her in some way, and at that moment, Yo-Yo continues cursing at him. As he embraces his friend one last time, the boy affirms that this is the end of this story, or at least, that's what he thought. Sometime later, we see our protagonist reflecting that as long as his fake relationship with Ning continues, he and Yo-Yo will drift apart and go their separate ways. And what was once just a memory is now reality, and to his friend Yo-Yo, he is now nothing more than a speck of dust in her memories. At that moment, we see our protagonist completely isolated in his bed, feeling a little sad about everything. In his mind, the boy wonders if this this will really be enough. Just then, his sister arrives, startling the boy and leaving him completely pale. Xiao, on the other hand, yells at his sister, Lulu, who looks confused by his sudden reaction. He immediately asks what the girl was doing there, and she replies that she wanted to check if her brother was okay since, if he was cold, she would cover him up. Moreover, she states that if he was in a bad mood, she would stay there and keep him company, so he wouldn't have to worry about anything. Finally, she mentions that if he was hungry, she could prepare something for him to eat right away, and upon hearing that, our protagonist simply agrees. At that moment, a message from Ming arrives on Bei's phone asking if he was awake because she wanted to talk about going to school together. As he walks toward the school, Gao notes that the atmosphere this morning felt tense, and we see several students glaring at him with hatred. At that moment, a bully approaches and smacks the boy's shoulder with a rolled-up newspaper. Two boys, trying to intimidate our protagonist, ask if he had been stalking Ming and continue attempting to scare him. Bai replies that he actually enjoyed their little act, but they should take off those gum tattoos from their arms, and the boys are shocked that our protagonist figure out their secret. Being part of the student council, Kiao starts intimidating the boys, making them quite scared and nervous. The boys promptly apologize, saying they were just messing around, and then ask if he really managed to get Ning. But at that moment, a familiar voice calls out for Kiao, and the two boys surrounding him freeze in shock. Majestic as always, Ning greets her boyfriend and apologizes for being late. The young man replies that she wasn't even that late, and then says it was quite the coincidence that they met there. The two boys who were with our protagonist start crying as they watch the scene, questioning how that guy managed to do it. Worried about her boyfriend, Ning asks if those guys were bothering him. However, the boy replies that it's all fine since those two were actually being very helpful for their lie. The girl agrees and starts pulling something out of her bag while saying it was for Bai. Chao asks what he's getting, and Ming says she personally made that lemon tea. Feeling quite embarrassed, Bai offers to carry Ning's bag as a way to make their relationship seem more real. The girl says it's unnecessary since it would be quite tiring for him. However, the boy whispers that actually carrying her bag is something a boyfriend would do, and the girl agrees. Soon after, he picks up the young woman's bag. But as soon as he grabs it, he feels an enormous weight that sends him to the ground. Ning immediately asks if he's okay, and he replies that she's just going to school. So he asks why she needs so many books in her bag. As he picks up one of the items, Go thinks that just that single book alone had enough content for an entire semester. Looking at Ming, he asks if literature students use their own backpacks as workout equipment. In a romantic tone, his partner asks if he thinks literature is something profound. Our protagonist replies that for someone into sciences like him, it's definitely something quite complicated. The girl pokes Bei's stomach and responds that literature is actually very valuable. She states that in the past and present, in the East and the West, literature has always been a reflection of people's lives. The things people experience and the emotions they feel are conveyed through literature. In other words, literature is essentially the study of human beings. Even fictional literature is just another possibility for people's lives, and expressing what they have in their minds is also literature. Finally, she pokes the boy's head and says that, in materialistic terms, that's what his mind is thinking. Holding Ning's hand, the boy, still confused, admits that even after her explanation, he still doesn't think he understands. She tries to give an example and asks if the boy thinks he loves Yo Yao. Hearing that, our protagonist looks quite puzzled as he starts recalling the moments he shared with the girl and states that he has known her for a long time. He comments that, as a friend, she is definitely an interesting and pleasant person to be around. But in terms of romance, she doesn't quite reach that level, and for some reason, he doesn't feel it drawn to her. Finally, he concludes that they should just remain within the boundaries of friendship, which leaves Ning deep in thought. The two continue talking until, at that moment, a person with a terrifying aura arrives at the scene. The orange-haired girl, known as Laren Jinha, arrives at the scene while declaring that the student council meeting was almost over, yet the boy was there dating. Clearly irritated, she says she wanted to see what color our protagonist's blood was and starts chasing after him. As he runs for his life, Bai questions what the girl is talking about. Laren Jinha closes in on the boy, not allowing him to escape her grasp. At that moment, Ning appears in front of the girl, flicking her forehead. Confused, Ning asks what was going on and why there was a chase happening. Sometime later, we see the student council president completely dejected, resting her head on the desk. Holding a hair ribbon, the girl looks quite sad about something. Confused while following Laren Jinha, our protagonist questions what the hell was going on and then asks her to stop acting that way. Turning around, the orange-haired girl asks if the president knew about the boy's relationship with Ning. He explains that yesterday when he was in the room with his girlfriend, the president came to see him, but after witnessing the scene, she left. Laren Jinha then places her hand on our protagonist's head as if she were petting him, but with a terrifying expression and calling the boy madam. She tells him that he should go apologize to the president as soon as possible. Furthermore, she states that she will help Bai Kiao apologize, leaving the boy utterly confused by everything. As he is dragged by his tie, Kiao starts questioning why he even had to apologize to Tang Xin when he did nothing wrong. Ken Wei calls him an idiot and says she doesn't know if they are perfect for each other, but luckily, she was there to fix this situation, and there was no time to waste. At that moment, the girl opens the door, and we see Tang Xin lying on her desk in her office, looking quite down. Laren Jinha kicks our protagonist into the room, forcing him to sort things out with his colleague. Irritated, Kuao turns around and asks if the girl was trying to kill him by putting him in that situation. However, the young woman states that if the two don't make up today, she won't let them out, even if they starve. Upon seeing Kyo's presence, Tang Xin gives a small relieved smile and hides the ribbon in her hand so that he won't see it. For a moment, the two lock eyes and an uncomfortable atmosphere settles in the room. Kyo and Tang Xin remain staring at each other for a moment without saying a word. However, breaking the awkward silence, Tang Sin comments that it's quite rare for the vice president to visit her. Pointing at a pile of accumulated papers beside the girl, he asks what the hell that was. He questions why she let so many papers pile up there, and she simply responds that the filing system broke, so she had to stack the papers there. Our protagonist jokes, saying that his president really is a queen of slacking off. As he sits on the desk beside her, Tang Sin remarks that there is definitely a difference between cow and a fish. She rests her head on a pile of books while continuing to talk with the boy. After lying down, she looks at Kiao gently, as if she wants to say something. Our protagonist asks why the young woman is suddenly telling him what she's been thinking about, and she seems hesitant but quite shy. The young woman confesses that she likes Bai Kiao. After saying that, she becomes a bit uncomfortable and embarrassed, trying to hide herself. Once again, that awkward silence fills the room, and neither of them dares to break it. For a moment, Kiao feels quite nervous, unsure of how to respond. Trying to escape the situation, the young man simply replies that he didn't want anything and thanks the girl. Tang Sin, quite irritated by his reaction, asks if he doesn't even want to know why. Nervously, he replies that if she doesn't want to say, he has no problem with it, and in his mind, he just tries to calm himself down. The girl states that when you like someone, you always think about loving something that person also likes, which is why she pretended to like fish, because the boy liked them. Kiao replies that it was quite a good reason for her to put her hands on a fish, considering she was crowned as a child prodigy in Jinggan City. Tang Sin stands up, and Bei thinks that this slay fox must be laughing inside every time she sees him blushing, not knowing what to do. The young woman starts teasing Kyo's appearance, and just as she was about to say it was a joke, someone interrupts the conversation. Peeking through the door, Laranjina says that Kyo has always done this to the president, and that's what led to today's situation. Confused, Tang Sin asks why the girl was still there while turning toward her. They continue whispering to each other so that our protagonist won't hear. The president asks her friend for advice since she doesn't know what to do about the situation anymore. Kenwei says she has no idea what the girl wants to say, but if she hesitates too much, she herself will reveal it to Kyo. Upon hearing this, Tang Sin looks confused. She pushes her friend out of the room, stating that she couldn't say that. Laranjina asks what Tang Sin plans to do since just playing the role of a mean woman wouldn't be enough. She states that the president was putting effort into something that wouldn't bring results and that she needed to confess soon. Then she declares that if Tang Sin wants to steal Kuo from Ning, she would fully support her friend. Ken approaches the white-haired girl and starts whispering something in her ear, which makes a glimmer of hope appear in Tang's eyes. At that moment, Tang Sin returns to the room saying they should continue with today's work and asks Kiao where they left off with the financial reports. Feeling abandoned and isolated, Kiao responds by questioning whether the girl has ever tried talking to him about something. At that moment, Laranjinha arrives and states that the two of them had a secret and that Kiao shouldn't ask too many questions. Then Chen says she's heading to the swimming club. She adds that because of that, they'll be alone for a while, and before leaving, she tells them not to do anything that could make people worried. Our protagonist asks if she's ever considered bombing the school as a joke. At that moment, Tang Sin gets irritated and smacks him with a piece of paper. She asks what the hell he's talking about and orders him to get back to work immediately. Bai notes that the reports from those clubs have been piling up for a week, and that if they don't finish reviewing them today, the school is more likely to explode. Tang Sin looks quite confused about what to do, and our protagonist seems annoyed. She sits down and comments that the two of them will go through all those papers together. While making notes, she mentions that the swimming club needs another new piece of equipment. Additionally, it was time for the tennis club to get new rackets, and she continues signing the papers. Finally, she talks about the literature club's monthly magazine subscription. Seeing that Tang Sin was referring to the literature club, and that she was actually planning something, the boy asks if everything is okay, and the girl just laughs. The president says that as for the literature club, magazines are meaningless for students, and that a student's duty is to study. And after a survey conducted among all committee members, it was suggested that the literature club should be disbanded. However, before she can sign the paper, our protagonist asks her to wait. Kiao states that she should treat all clubs equally and impartially. However, the girl claims she already is impartial, but Bai Kiao responds that this is a lie. He orders her to check the requests and that only he would approve them. And while picking up his calculator, Tang Sin remarks that the vice president is really very clever. Tang strokes the young man's head and says she needs his help with a special case, leaving the boy confused. She simply states that only he could help her and that they would meet on Saturday. However, Gao feels a sense of unease in the air. At the mall, we see Lulu looking at some clothes in a store. She asks her brother to try on an outfit, but the boy is startled upon seeing it. Trying to refuse, he states that he still has a swimsuit he only wore once and doesn't need to buy another. Blatantly, Lulu says that his swimsuit has disappeared, and besides that, he was enrolled in swimming this year, so he would need a new one. The boy questions how his clothes could disappear since he had put them in his bag, and upon hearing this, Lulu looks a little uneasy. So Bai Kiao, rummaging through his bag, finds nothing but the bottle of tea he had received from Ning and wonders where his swimwear has gone. Realizing this, our protagonist says he is nervous because if Lulu sees the bottle of tea from Ning, she will kill him on the spot. Hiding his bag, the boy admits that his swimsuit has indeed disappeared and asks if he can buy another one. However, his sister notices that Bai is hiding something. She immediately asks to check the boy's bag to see if he was hiding something, but he refuses and runs away. The young man tries to deny it and says he can explain what's going on. Kiao claims that there was a bug inside his bag, and this bug was super creepy, looking like an octopus, and if his sister saw it, she wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Almost believing him, Lulu tells him to stop talking nonsense and let her check the bag. Our protagonist easily holds her back since the girl is extremely short and asks her to wait a moment. Being as cunning as he is, the boy questions how Lulu knew that his swimwear had disappeared and asks if, by any chance, something unimaginable had happened behind his back caused by his sister. She becomes extremely embarrassed, not knowing how to respond. With a devilish grin, she says that if her big brother really wanted to know, she would say it out loud. Seeing his sister's mischievous expression, he asks what she's about to say and begs her not to say anything weird since there were a lot of people around. Lulu moves closer to the boy and says that the reason his swimwear disappeared was because of her. She starts telling him what happened last week. The girl states that last week she wanted to go out wearing a skirt but couldn't find any shorts to wear underneath, and it so happened that she saw his swim trunks lying around. Even though they were tight, she put on his swim trunks without his permission. Our protagonist tries to shut his sister up while saying that you would just buy a new pair. Since she was already there, he asks if she also wanted a swimsuit. This makes the girl blush, asking if he would enjoy the sight. Hearing that, our protagonist flicks his sister on the forehead, questioning if she had dust in her head. With an innocent look, she asks if her big brother was really thinking about those things in secret. As she walks away, the young girl claims that the truth is that her little brother has these kinds of thoughts. In his mind, Kyo says that this despicable child shouldn't be misleading people with her false accusations, and the girl begins looking for a swimsuit for herself. The young girl seems quite confused while looking at the price of the two swimsuits. Kyo asks why she's acting like that since she had been saving money for a long time, and based on the estimated time, she should have a lot saved up. The boy approaches his sister and asks how much money she has saved, and the girl responds that she has a lot. Because of this, Kyo remarks that she's been saving for a long time. However, the girl replies that yes, she has, but it's still not enough as it's just a drop compared to the ocean of what she wants to buy. Our protagonist asks what the young girl really plans to do with that money, and she asks if her big brother really wants to know. Blushing, she says that if he really wanted to, it's not like she couldn't reveal it. But at that moment, Kyo ruins the moment by saying he doesn't want to know. In his mind, he admits that he's actually very curious, but even the closest siblings should have some secrets to keep. Not to mention, the secret could be the biggest one in the world regarding teenage romance. And maybe his sister is a magical girl, or she has a key, the power to save everyone. But in any case, his sister definitely can't be anything like that. Even so, Kyo says that one thing he is certain of is that his sister is very cute, and the girl gives him a small smile. He goes up to her, saying that if she's saving money, she shouldn't be spending it irresponsibly. Bai states that fortunately, he doesn't save money, and if she likes it, he'll buy it for her. However, while holding that bikini, our protagonist asks her to wait a moment. The young man starts imagining his cute sister wearing that outfit at the beach and thinks she would look extremely good in it. However, if some bad guy from abroad saw her, he fears that his sister might get a marriage proposal, and the boy becomes quite irritated at the possibility. He suggests another swimsuit for his sister, one that covers more of her body so that this doesn't happen. Sticking her tongue out at Kyo, the girl claims that her big brother is very stingy. She walks away saying that she's going to try it on in the fitting room, and the young man feels happy about that. Suddenly, an unfamiliar person arrives behind our protagonist and asks if he is Bai Kyo. That girl throws a bag at the boy and states that it's for him. She explains that Yoeo hasn't been going to school for 2 days, and including today, it's already been 3. She says she asked the entire school, and Bai Kyo seems to be the only one who knows where her house is. Besides, the student council's job is to serve the students, so she's counting on the boy to deliver the notes to Yoeo and finally states that he cannot refuse a request from his superiors. The boy looks quite confused, seeing this extremely tall woman, and before leaving, she tells our protagonist to deliver the bag by the end of the afternoon. The boy is left completely confused, and sometime later, Lulu comes out of the fitting room wearing her swimsuit, asking her big brother if it looks good on her. However, she finds him holding a woman's bag. Extremely furious, she questions what that bag is and which evil woman gave it to him, declaring that if he doesn't have a good explanation, she will be ruthless. But while running, the boy says he'll explain it to her later when they get home. Somewhere else, the young man thinks that being chased by his sister and tortured when he gets home isn't that bad, since right now, the biggest headache he could have is figuring out how to deliver the notes to Yoeo. After all, she hasn't been to school and must be feeling down. Holding the bag, the boy doesn't even know what he should say if his friend were to open the door. He imagines himself just handing her the notes with an extremely calm expression. However, the boy rejects that idea as he couldn't just say something so basic. He wasn't a newspaper delivery boy. He thinks of 2 other possibilities but immediately dismisses them, realizing they wouldn't work either. Completely overwhelmed, the boy says he's trash for rejecting someone and then suddenly showing up at their house. The young man continues analyzing various possibilities, trying to find the perfect one until a female foot steps up behind him. This unknown person calls Kyo handsome young man and says it's been a long time since she last saw him. Already inside his friend's house after explaining why he was there to Yoeo's mother, she replies that she will deliver the notes he brought as her daughter isn't home. After saying that, the woman asks why Kyo doesn't stay for dinner with them, calling him handsome young man since she bought fresh vegetables today. Our protagonist thanks her but then says that he's a little busy with something at home and probably won't be able to stay. But at that moment, Cheng says she has something to ask the boy. The woman mentions that she heard her daughter was rejected a few days ago and then asks the handsome young man if he knows what happened. Shaking, Kyo asks why his aunt suddenly brought that up and says he doesn't quite understand. Kang moves closer to Bai and asks if he really doesn't know anything. The boy replies that now that he thinks about it, he actually doesn't have any plans at home and will stay. Putting on her apron, the woman says that's great and then asks him to look forward to her cooking. In his mind, our protagonist wonders what kind of terrifying pressure he just felt, as it seemed like he was being intimidated. At that moment, Yoeo arrives home, dressed in a slightly baggy outfit, stating that she brought the green onions her mother asked for. The girl comes across our protagonist, who, despite being nervous, greets her. Yoeo starts screaming, saying she thinks she's lost her mind while calling for her mother. The woman asks what her daughter is talking about. The pink-haired girl throws herself into Cheng's arms, completely terrified by something. She claims she's seeing a hallucination and points at Kwao sitting on the couch. Hearing her outburst, the woman starts plotting something and an idea comes to her mind. Cheng tells her daughter that, unfortunately, she really might have gone crazy since that day the doctor gave her a very serious diagnosis. Yoeo asks what she should do, and her mother responds that once she's cured of her illness, the boy on the couch will disappear, and that she should take her hallucinations to her room. Blushing, the girl asks if she really should go to her room to play for a bit. Yoeo asks the illusion of Bai Kao how he's been doing. Our protagonist wonders why he's suddenly being called the illusion of Bai Kao. The pink-haired girl says that it's really great since he looks exactly like the real Bai Kao. Kiao replies that it's been a while since he last saw her and asks how she's been. Then he tells her that these are some notes her classmates took for her. The girl looks quite surprised, saying that this illusion is really powerful. Not only does it talk, but also has the exact same personality as Bai Kao. Bai wonders if he has gone insane, but then hands the papers to the girl, telling her she should take the notes and not waste the efforts of her classmates. With a sly grin, the girl responds that she won't do that. The young man asks why, and she says that she knows illusions disappear if you touch them. That means that as long as she doesn't make contact with the illusion, Bai Kao will never disappear. And since she loves him, she wouldn't be able to bear it if this miracle vanished. However, as she stands up, she steps on a small chick-shaped toy and slips. She starts falling toward our protagonist, who looks quite startled and frozen in place. The girl ends up crashing, her head hitting Bai Kao's most sensitive area, and she becomes completely shocked by the situation. Having taken a blow to such a painful spot, Kyo starts screaming while Yoeo swears that her friend's illusion is about to disappear. She clings to our protagonist, begging him not to vanish from her life, while the boy remains silent. However, the pink-haired girl notices something strange. The illusion simply didn't disappear. Looking at Bai Kao, she asks what's going on, while the boy, practically lifeless from the pain, can barely react. Blushing, the girl immediately realizes that this is the real Bai Kao, and the young man, struggling, confirms that yes, he's a real person. Embarrassed, Yoeo tries to hide in any way possible, and when called by her mother, demands to know why Cheng didn't tell her that Bai Kao was there. She complains that she didn't even put on makeup and is dressed too casually, saying that now she won't be able to get married before running toward her room. Cheng immediately realizes that the one who probably rejected her daughter was none other than Mr. Handsome, and then tells him to resolve the situation himself. Pointing to himself, Bai Kao asks why he should be the one to resolve this. Cheng replies that if he doesn't settle things today, he won't be able to go home. Hearing this, Bei thinks that this woman has some devious tactics. Facing an ominous energy radiating from his friend's room, the boy realizes he's back at square one and wonders how he should deal with Yoeo now. Chao walks up to her bedroom door, knocking and asking if she's inside. While getting dressed, the girl responds that he's knocking on the wrong room and that Yoeo isn't there. Our protagonist notices a red liquid dripping from under the girl's door and becomes extremely worried, thinking that his friend has done something reckless. He orders her not to do anything drastic while violently opening the bedroom door. However, the boy sees an unimaginable sight that leaves Yoeo completely paralyzed. Upon entering the room, our protagonist yells at Yoeo not to do anything rash. However, he finds the girl wearing only her underwear, which makes her completely embarrassed. Panicked, the young girl immediately throws on a pig-themed pajama while insisting that Yoeo isn't in this room and that he has entered the wrong one. Our protagonist realizes that the girl is fine, and the young woman, pretending to be someone else, informs him that her friend just had a mild fever and will be back at school soon. At that moment, looking behind him, the boy realizes that the red liquid dripping from the room was just a jar of spilled juice. Kiao asks his friend if she has a cold and then casually mentions that there seems to be some fruit juice spilled by the door. Hearing this, the girl jumps up in a panic and rushes to check something, completely distressed. Upon seeing that the spilled juice hadn't splashed onto a particular object, the girl appears visibly relieved. It turns out that the object in her hands is a box of beautifully crafted cupcakes. She brings them to Bai Kao and asks if he'd like to try one since they're incredibly delicious. The young man accepts and takes a bite. Overjoyed, the pink-haired girl eagerly asks if he likes it. The boy replies that it's delicious and notes that this particular sweet has never been on the menu at Yoeo's mother's shop since he's never had it before. The pink-haired girl explains that she made that dessert herself and that they don't sell it at the shop. By the way, she was an honorary member of the school's confectionery club. Chao refutes the girl and asks if she is or isn't Yoeo since there was only one honorary member of the school's confectionery club, and that was his friend. Realizing she's been found out, the girl turns away, saying that Yoeo asked her to deliver it to him since she really wasn't there. Our protagonist tells the young woman that she's a good student and shouldn't play this kind of childish identity game. But at that moment, she interrupts him. The girl starts reciting some words, saying that someone is in love and someone spends the whole night staring at the ocean. She states that these are lyrics from a song and that Yoeo asked her to say this to Bai Kao. She continues, saying that she went to the beach at Liang Bay, took a taxi there last night, and enjoyed the breeze. Feeling guilty, the boy apologizes, but the fake Yoyo tells him he doesn't mean to say that. She explains that those are also lyrics from a song, leaving our protagonist quite embarrassed. The young woman then asks how he's been and how things are going with Ning. The boy replies that they're doing fine, but at that moment, Yoyo calls him an idiot. She explains that if Chao were her boyfriend, she would never let him visit another girl's house alone. While speaking, the girl starts pressing a rabbit plush with her feet. Embarrassed, the boy just responds that he was ordered to do this, so he had no choice but to come. After saying that, he falls silent. In her mind, Yoyo says that at least the conversation is over, and she needs to grab her clothes and change. The boy starts saying something, but when he turns around, he notices that his friend is trembling under her coat and asks if she's crying. He moves closer to the girl, wondering why she's already crying when he hasn't even said anything yet. Qiao asks to talk to her face to face, and at that moment, he removes her coat. In reality, she was changing underneath, and the boy becomes completely flustered. Yoyo also turns completely red with embarrassment, tells her friend to die, and immediately orders him to close his eyes. Sometime later, our protagonist reflects that the tension between him and Yoyo seems to have been resolved, and that he agreed to work at her mother's shop on weekends. The boy admits that this is obviously a dangerous sign, but he can't refuse since he rejected Cheng's daughter. As he walks, the boy notes that even so, he still shamelessly went to their house and had dinner with them. That was pretty bold of him, so he couldn't say no. Suddenly, our protagonist notices Ning in front of him, petting a small kitten. The cat ends up slipping inside the girl's blouse, making her quite startled by the situation. Still, upon seeing the adorable creature, the young woman gently strokes the kitten. Qiao approaches his fake girlfriend and asks if she wants to head home early. The girl replies that she actually wants to return her books while the library is still open. Meanwhile, the kitten under her blouse starts trying to escape. It suddenly jumps toward our protagonist, aiming for the cupcakes he received from Yoyo, causing Ning to cling onto Bei. While this is happening, someone arrives and observes the scene. After receiving that hug, the boy turns red and flustered, left completely speechless. Once again, the kitten starts squirming out of Ming's shirt, desperate to break free. As he carefully removes the feline, our protagonist begins scolding it. He asks why the kitten is being so mischievous, and Ming suggests that maybe it's just hungry. Qiao then asks if Ning wants him to accompany her, but the young woman says it's fine and that he should head home. We then see Laren Jinha watching the scene. Laren Jinha starts talking to the student council president, informing her about what's happening. But in her mind, she notes that they act far too formal for a couple. The young woman then spots the same kitten from before and begins petting it, remarking that it must have had a tough time, calling it Little Tangerine. They then see that the kitten was actually associated with the student council, Juyu Jing. Sometime later, Chao is seen lying lazily on his bed. The young man remembers that his sister said it was late, that she was going on a picnic with her classmates, and that she would be sleeping over at Xiao Yuan's house for the night. He also recalls that she told him not to eat instant noodles at night and not to bring girls over to his house. Feeling isolated, the boy complains that his sister just left out of nowhere and states that once again, he was the only one left behind to spend his holiday alone. Sometime later, we see the boy sitting on his couch, surrounded by various snacks, holding a soda in his hand, celebrating that this is going to be a great day. Suddenly, the doorbell rings and the boy heads to the door, wondering if his sister forgot something again. However, when he opens the door, he is greeted by his president dressed in a rather seductive outfit. The young woman, upon seeing him, greets the vice president with a simple hello. The boy becomes nervous, unsure of what to do, and begins closing the door without even responding to the girl. Giving him a lesson, the girl says that he opened the door just in time and questions whether he had forgotten that he had an important task to do today. Still irritated, our protagonist asks how Lulu had grown so much in just a few minutes. The president tries to force her way in, saying that Lulu is already used to this and that she should enter to take care of Qiao. But the boy refuses, saying that his sister will get mad. At that moment, as they argue, a woman greets Bai Qiao with a good morning, making the boy pause his dispute with his colleague. He returns the greeting to Aunt Keksu, and at that moment, his neighbor comments that he is very lucky to have such a beautiful girlfriend. Tang Xin looks quite pleased, but Bai Qiao quickly shuts down the moment by clarifying that this is a misunderstanding. She is not his girlfriend. Upon hearing this, the girl appears disheartened. Aunt Su, on the other hand, says that even the girl admitted it, and Bai Qiao shouldn't be shy, as she wouldn't tell anyone that they are dating. Our protagonist realizes that Tang Xin is being dramatic and embarrassed, pushes her inside his house, stating that they shouldn't bother their neighbor. Seeing that the whole situation was a setup by Tang, the boy thinks to himself that this white fox is terrifying. The young woman simply states that she didn't say anything. However, Tang Xin declares that the entire situation was dictated by Aunt Su's words about them. The president sits on the couch and says she got up early to remind the vice president about the student council task, and she also brought cookies. But since arriving, she's only been accused. While eating one of the snacks, she asks if the boy wants some. Our protagonist questions whether this is another trick to provoke him and take embarrassing photos, then asserts that he's a highly experienced and strong fighter. The young man declares that if this white fox wants to tease him twice in the morning, she is still 20,000 years behind. However, with that cookie in her mouth, the young woman attempts to seduce him, saying that it's an expensive treat and asking if he really doesn't want to try it. Stating that she literally has the cookie in her mouth. Offering it to him, the boy asks if she is really being serious. Still, he decides to play along, opening his mouth and leaning toward her. However, the president suddenly makes the cookie disappear and tries to grab our protagonist, who quickly backs away. She simply says that the cookie is no longer available, leaving the boy confused. Tang asks if Cho wants to know where the cookie went, and our protagonist realizes that this must be a magic trick. The president calls him silly and places her hand behind his ear, revealing that the cookie was there. The cookie appears in the girl's hand, but at that moment, she flinches in surprise. Xiao realizes that the cookie was actually behind her ear and, as he leans in, accidentally kisses the girl's cheek, leaving both of them completely flustered. They remain frozen for a moment, unsure of how to react. Both instinctively turn their backs to each other, utterly embarrassed by what just happened. Extremely flustered, Qiao apologizes. Tang Xin remains completely silent, and our protagonist states that this was his fault. The young man explains that he thought the cookie was behind the president's ear, so he got confused. He quickly gets up, saying that it's getting late and that he's going to change so they can go and take care of the student council tasks. However, Tang Xin immediately grabs the boy's hand, catching his attention. She states that he just kissed someone and questions whether he really wasn't going to do anything about it. She also asks if he was a heartless scoundrel. Seeing the situation he was in with the girl, he wonders what that fox was scheming. Tang Xin mentions that her mother told her that it's a family rule. If she kisses a boy, she has to marry him for the rest of her life. But Qiao dismisses it as nonsense. A little later, we see the two walking through a shopping mall, and Tang Xin talks to Qiao about the filing cabinet they came to buy. She states that after all, it's something they will use for a long time, so it's better to buy it from a physical store so they can test it. Xin walks into a store with several filing cabinets, and as she approaches one, she states that it seems like a good choice. However, she soon realizes that Bai Qiao is no longer there. The young woman turns around, wondering how the boy could suddenly disappear. Meanwhile, our protagonist is standing in front of a toy magic crystal ball, dramatically saying that there's something he has been keeping secret all this time. Like a protagonist from an isekai, Qiao declares he usually keeps a low profile to live a peaceful life in this world, but his true identity is the Lord of the Moon. Tang Xin, seeing this scene, starts recording while Qiao announces that he is the man who controls the light and the moon, known as the God of Eternal Night. Playing along, the young woman asks what powers the God of Eternal Night possesses. As she continues recording, our protagonist claims that he drinks blood instead of wine, and that his voice can become a blade if he whispers. He declares that even if he merely utters the word darkness, the world will become nothing but an eternal night. Turning to Tang Xin, the young man adds that humans will tremble and that this is only 1% of his power. The president continues her recording and simply asks what else he does as the God of Eternal Night. Completely frustrated, Bei throws himself at her, demanding to know if she recorded everything. Tang Xin responds that she now has several cool videos of the vice president. The boy immediately kneels and desperately pleads for her to delete them. The young woman then says that if he wants them gone, they'll play a guessing magic trick. However, as she recalls the kiss she received on her cheek from our protagonist, she hesitates, feeling a bit flustered. She thinks that playing a guessing game with this fool isn't a great idea and suddenly places her phone between her two planets. She declares that if the vice president wants to delete the video, he'll have to do it himself, and our protagonist thinks to himself that this fluffy white fox is incredibly cunning. Qiao remembers that they came here to buy a filing cabinet and quickly asks if she still wants to check them out. The young woman walks up to a filing cabinet and sits on it, looking quite impressed. She comments on how comfortable it is and remains sitting in a rather seductive pose. Our protagonist decides to abandon his initial question and instead thinks that, come to think of it, this woman always seems to sit in the strangest places. Tang Xin gets up and states that it would be a good choice to buy this one. However, the boy responds that at this price, the student council's budget will be completely drained. The girl then suggests using the literature club's funds. Furious, Bai asks why she always has to be so cruel to the literature club and states that, as the student council president, she shouldn't be stealing. Sometime later, Bai Qiao reports that, in the end, the expensive cabinet was purchased, and that this month's meeting was all about bankruptcy. But it was also during this moment, when the room was completely silent, that an embarrassing phrase slowly emerged in his mind. Qiao confesses that he hesitated to say it directly, knowing that if he did, he and Tang Xin might not even remain friends. However, if he didn't say it, his heart would feel so uneasy that he'd have to accept defeat and live in fear. The girl looks back at Bai Qiao, seeming confused as if she can sense that he wants to say something. The boy takes the initiative and starts to speak, and seeing this, Tang Xin becomes completely nervous, trembling, thinking it's a confession. Watching the boy, who looks extremely anxious as if he's about to confess, she wonders in her mind if he has finally realized it. Feeling nervous, she orders him to hurry up and stop hesitating. However, the young man remains hesitant, too embarrassed to reveal what he truly feels. He then throws cold water on Tang Xin's expectations, saying that she still hasn't given him the game she promised last time he helped her. Clenching the cup in her hand with extreme force, irritated, Tang Xin says that she couldn't hear him. Then she asks him to repeat what he just said. Our protagonist starts talking about the game again, but before he can finish his sentence, the girl grabs him by the collar and demands to know if he did that on purpose. Furious, the president begins threatening him, asking how that piece of trash dares to toy with a young woman's feelings. She then asks what he expected from a shark. Feeling threatened, Qiao says that it's best if she doesn't kill anyone, as that's illegal. Also, if someone is killed, it might turn into a demon. As revenge, Tang completely changes her aura and returns to being that sweet young girl. However, showing her cunning nature, the girl pulls out her phone from between her melons and plays the extremely embarrassing video she recorded of Bai. Hearing all the words he dramatically recited earlier in his cringe moment, the young man becomes utterly devastated. Other people around them start judging them for their extremely weird behavior. Our protagonist takes the president's hand and calls her Your Honor. Then he begs her to please pause the video, since his life already has enough problems, and when he says that, it looks like he's about to cry. Tang Sin, as wicked as ever, replies that it all depends on how sincere the vice president is. She states that even if it's not a gift, normally when a guy goes out with a girl, he should give her something. Our protagonist pulls out a small fox-shaped purse and asks if that would work as a present. He states that the fox is white, just like Tang Sin, and that they both have red eyes but their personality. However, before he can finish his sentence, the young woman once again threatens him with the video, and he immediately begs her to stop. Then he clarifies that he didn't mean to call Sin cunning. Feeling pleased with the flattery, the girl threatens once again to press play on the video, saying that she'd love to hear more about this. Chow claims that the little purse symbolizes the president's pure heart and her spirit, and more importantly, the best thing about it, it's incredibly cute and stylish. The young woman raises her hand, touching the little fox plush, saying that it's nice, while our protagonist looks embarrassed. Tang Sin appears quite happy to receive the gift and even a little shy about it. Bai replies that it's good to see that she liked it, and she remains silent for a moment. Hugging her new plush, Tang Sin states that since she particularly liked it, she will keep the fox. As she walks away excitedly, the president announces that the vice president will be paying for his own bill, and our protagonist realizes that Laren Jinho was absolutely right about the gift. He celebrates, thinking that today was another great day to capture the white fox. Somewhere else, the president comments that not only did he go shopping with a girl on the weekend, but he also had the audacity to take her to a cafe in the afternoon. She then remarks that the world should be filled with only guys like him, leaving the boy confused. Our protagonist remembers that she sat there because she wanted to since she was tired of eating. However, ignoring the topic, the white fox says she has something to ask and wonders if he remembers their first meeting. Tang Sin states that on that day, the bouquet she received from Kiao wasn't actually meant for her. Then she asks who the real owner of the bouquet he gave her was. Imagining the bouquet of daisies fallen on the ground, the young man replies that he's sorry, but he can't talk about it. Seeing the saddened expression on his face, Tang Sin apologizes, but he tells her it's okay. Kiao lifts his head and says that he has a similar question, and that there's a reason why he's wanted to ask it all this time. The young man asks if she's okay with it, and she replies that she is. However, with a mischievous look, she asks if he's going to pay the consultation fee. But the young man questions whether she's gone crazy since when she asked her question, he didn't charge anything. She then suggests that if she can answer the question, she'll buy him a drink, but if she can't, then he'll have to buy drinks for both of them. Our protagonist argues that, logically, it should be the other way around. However, as she moves her legs closer to his, the girl declares that he can either ask or not. And the decision was entirely in his hands, and the young man thought to himself that this fox was playing dirty. The young man then begins to recount that on the day they met, it was raining heavily. However, she was the only person standing at the open bus stop. Then we see our protagonist in a flashback. He was staring at Tang Sin, completely isolated and without an umbrella, wondering what she was doing there. The boy asks himself if he should just leave her alone, but as the gentleman he is, he decides to face his fear. Xiao approaches Tang and then offers her a bouquet of daisies. Holding the umbrella above her head so she wouldn't get wet, he asks where her house is. And then, like a true gentleman, he tells her he will walk her home. But upon hearing this, the Tang from the past becomes extremely emotional, on the verge of tears. Returning to reality, the girl replies that it's not really appropriate to talk about this subject, and obviously, because of that, the boy will have to pay for a soda. As she walks over to the vending machine, the young man says he is absolutely certain why he asked that question and is very curious about it. Tang, with a small smile, just watches Bai Qiao walking away, happy with the situation. He returns with 2 Coca-Colas and declares that these are the spoils of war that the girl won with her cunning intelligence. The young woman retorts that if her mother knew Bai let her drink that, she would break his legs. The boy asks her not to go that far. The sly fox, with a knowing smirk, states that now he has a chance to win his drink back and asks if he wants to hear about it. Our protagonist seems to refuse, stating that she must have dark plans she can't tell anyone about. The fox says it will be just like before. She will ask a question, and the boy will answer. As she moves closer to him, she starts teasing him, asking if he doesn't want a chance to defeat her. Desperate, the young man keeps shouting for her to stay away. But ignoring him, she starts asking if, last week, he rejected someone's confession. Upon hearing this, the boy becomes quite confused. Several questions run through his mind. He wonders how she knows if someone told Tang about it, or if she even saw what happened that day. Qiao thinks that if that fox asks him who confessed, he won't answer. But since she only asked if he rejected someone, it's a simple question. Bai Qiao then states that there's no way that could be true, but Tang Sin knows he's lying. Then the young man declares that she lost, and the girl says that's a shame. Right after that, she takes a sip of the Coke, then offers it to the boy. He asks how he's supposed to drink it when she has already taken a sip. She replies that she only said that if he won, he could take his drink back. While holding her fox plush, Tang Sin states that the most important task has already been accomplished, and since it's getting late, it's time for them to go home. Tang teases him, telling the boy to drink that bottle of Coke when he gets home because if he drinks it in front of her, she will feel embarrassed. Kaela just stares at the bottle, a bit confused, not knowing what to think. The next morning, we see Trao lying in his bed, saying that he can feel the demon inside his body craving blood again. In his mind, the boy states that he really wants to drink duck blood soup. He gets up, saying he needs to find something to eat and survive since, without Lulu, he won't last much longer. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, putting the boy on high alert. Excited, the boy runs toward the door, celebrating because his little princess Lulu has finally returned to save her brother. But outside, he is met by Yoeo, who, for some reason, is dressed as a vampire. Completely shameless, the young girl simply greets the boy with a good morning while staring at him. Seeing the girl standing there, the young man looks extremely confused. He calls out to his sister Lulu, saying that only a day has passed and asking why she has turned into a pink-haired demon. Yo-Yo confronts the boy, questioning what he's talking about, then asks if he forgot that he was supposed to work with her today. Then she asks if the boy isn't surprised by her new outfit. Kyo simply responds that if she ever stopped showing up at his doorstep one day, maybe he could muster a little bit of surprise. Furious, Yo-Yo strikes the young man, simply saying that she understands. She then asks if he hasn't had breakfast yet and announces that she brought some cupcakes. She also asks where his sister is, but the boy thinks to himself that he will never lose another battle in front of his house again, since he couldn't defeat the president. So the boy states that his mother and sister are in the bedroom and his father is in the living room, and she can go greet them. Nervous, Yo-Yo turns around asking if he didn't say that his uncle and aunt were away because they were busy with work. The boy replies that yes, but that they came back. She asks why he didn't tell her earlier, since she only brought 2 cupcakes, thinking it would be just him and his sister. The boy responds that his parents wouldn't mind. The girl retorts that she minds and, frustrated, starts taking off her shoes while declaring that she'll wait for him downstairs as she wasn't prepared for this. But Krell thinks that she arrogantly entered his house, so she wouldn't get away unpunished. He places his hand on the girl's head and then calls for his parents. Bai announces that his classmate came to visit, and Yo-Yo turns around with an extremely sorrowful look, ready to burst into tears. However, the boy reveals that he tricked her. His parents weren't home and Lulu was out of town. Upon hearing this, Yo-Yo calls her friend an idiot and grabs his hand for a moment. She declares that she will bite him to death and prepares like a true vampire to suck his blood. At that moment, all that can be heard is the scream of a boy who can do nothing. At Cheng's shop, sometime later, Yo-Yo is seen dressing our protagonist in an apron. It's evident that he is dressed as a vampire, extremely uncomfortable with the situation. Annoyed, the young man asks if she can choose a different hand next time since she always bites the same spot. But the girl replies that there will be more chances. Kidao responds that even if she's joking, it's still a little scary, and the young woman gives a cheerful smile. She continues dressing him and asks if he really thinks so, to which the boy replies that he does. After that, confused, she asks who's joking with him. But at that moment, a voice interrupts her. A red-haired girl arrives at the shop, celebrating that their maid leader is finally here. However, the woman present notices another person and looks quite puzzled. Yo-Yo explains that this is her classmate, who came to work part-time there, and that she can feel free to use him however she wants, since he owes her mother Chen. Lai retorts that since she hasn't seen Yo-Yo for almost 2 weeks, it seems like she has fallen quite in love. She then adds that besides that, she didn't expect the shop's themed outfits to look like couples' costumes on them. The pink-haired girl simply responds that they are just friends, while our protagonist realizes that this is almost the same situation as yesterday. She states that she'll just pretend she doesn't know anything and responds with confusion, while Lai notices that this is probably the two's first teenage crush. Lai says that she isn't one to gossip easily, so she promises not to let the boss find out, so they don't have to worry. Xiao, confused, questions how that girl still managed to misunderstand the situation, and suddenly, Li pushes both of them toward the kitchen, stating that she won't spy on whatever they're doing. Then she informs them that the things on the table were specially arranged for her by the boss, Chef Cheng. After finishing her sentence, she closes the door, wishing them a good time together. Blushing, Yo-Yo asks if what Sister Lai meant was that they made a great couple. However, the young man replies that no, it was just a misunderstanding. He states that since they are here to work, they should start with their tasks first, and upon hearing this, Yo-Yo becomes quite annoyed, seeing how he changed the subject. As she looks at a piping bag, the young girl realizes that they are dressed like little demons. Holding the object, she declares that since there's still work to do, she'll just cooperate with him. Yo-Yo approaches our protagonist while asking what his mother had prepared for them. The girl and her friend are completely shocked upon seeing an unbelievable sight on the table. Wu sighs and asks why he looks so surprised, and Kyo asks in return if she isn't shocked too. The girl replies that just a little. We then see that their task was to make a cake for a boy to apologize to the girl whose heart he broke, making it clear that this was a subtle jab at Kyo. Holding the order slit, the pink-haired girl says that it's not anything extraordinary. Besides, she states that it's just a special request from a customer. She then insists that if Kyo doesn't do it, he'll get fired and reassures him that there's nothing suspicious about the task list, guaranteeing that it's definitely not directed at anyone in particular. Our protagonist, visibly annoyed, questions if it really wasn't meant for anyone specifically, and Yo-Yo simply replies that it wasn't. Right after that, she declares that they will help the guy who broke the girl's heart make the cake, and the boy agrees. While preparing the filling, the young woman asks if it's the boy's first time making a cake, and our protagonist replies that if they manage to pull it off, then yes, it will be. For some reason, the girl seems pleased and happily states that this is very good. She thinks to herself that the plan is to catch the boy off guard by smearing his face with filling and easily taking an embarrassing picture of Bai Kyo. Yo-Yo encourages the boy to start spreading the filling on the cake and tells him that if he can't do it, she'll accept him as a beginner with no problem. The protagonist asks if he should be grateful for that. The girl states that if he messes up, he shouldn't feel embarrassed. Then at that moment, she starts moving her hand behind the boy's back. Wu remarks that the approach was successful, and right after, she prepares to smear filling on the boy's face. However, the filling flies through the air, and instead, she ends up slapping the boy right across the face. Complaining about the pain, he says that he thought she was teaching him how to make cakes. She looks back, saying that the cream was clearly in her hand just a moment ago, until they both realize that she actually dropped the filling on the floor. As she steps back, the young woman slips on the spilled filling and falls. Reacting quickly, Yo-Yo grabs onto Bai Kyo's belt to keep herself from falling completely to the ground. At that moment, Aunt Lai enters the room, commenting that they've been there for quite some time and then asks if they've accomplished anything or if they need help. At that moment, we see Yoeo pulling on Baekho's pants, trying to hold herself up while the boy protests. The woman is completely shocked, then quickly retreats, apologizing. However, Ko tries to explain that it's not what she's thinking. It was just a misunderstanding. Yoeo falls to her knees, whining. She starts saying that Aunt Lai will definitely get the wrong idea and that this is all Baekho's fault. However, the boy retorts that he wasn't the one who caused all this chaos. We then see that the girl was only pretending, and with a mischievous tone, she asks if the boy isn't even going to try to comfort her. But the young man replies that there's no need for that. She then says that since he's not going to put in any effort, he can't blame her, and she prepares to throw Phil in him. Being pushed to the floor, he asks why the girl suddenly changed expressions when she was just pretending to cry moments ago. The young woman tells him not to move because she has been preparing for a long time to take embarrassing pictures of Baekho to create her evil fantasy. However, the startled young man questions what kind of person announces their plans right to someone's face, and it turns out that Yoeo never cut the tip of the piping bag. Since she's forcing it, the bag ends up bursting and all the filling splatters onto her own face. Yoeo falls backward, wondering why this always happens to her. She complains that of course she was supposed to be the villain today, but she's always the one who ends up getting messed up. At that moment, Kyo desperately gets up, questioning if this is normal in a kitchen, and they both see that the oven is practically catching fire. The girl screams that this is dangerous, then immediately throws the boy out of the room, saying she'll handle it. In a dramatic scene, he stretches his hand toward Yoeo, yelling for her not to leave him alone. However, the girl closes the door and all that is visible is smoke pouring out from inside. Shigao wonders if they are really here for a part-time job and if they are actually making cakes. Suddenly, two melons press against the boy from behind and a woman calling him cutie asks if he's free now. We then see a more mature woman questioning if that young man was new there since she had never seen him before. Kao responds that yes, he's a part-time worker. The woman closes her book and asks if he wouldn't like to have a conversation with her, but the boy says that wouldn't be a good idea. With a seductive look, she says that he isn't busy right now, and besides, she noticed that his eyes look exactly like her first boyfriend's. Embarrassed, the boy says that must just be a coincidence and takes a step back. However, the woman pulls Kaiwa closer to her, stating that the bakery doesn't pay much, and if he wants, he could stay with her after work and earn some extra money. Bringing her mouth close to his ear, she asks what the boy thinks of the idea, but Kaiwa immediately questions what kind of proposal that is. At that moment, an eerie aura makes our protagonist shiver, and he thinks that even though he doesn't watch many dramas, he wonders if this customer is some kind of scammer. Yoreo suddenly hugs Kyo from behind, asking what he's doing. She tells him that Sister Lai is calling for him and that he should hurry up or she'll be mad later. Kyo tries to explain that he was just talking to a customer, but the girl insists that he should hurry. The woman then asks her dear who this girl is. At that moment, Yoeo covers Bei's mouth and declares that he is her boyfriend. Upon hearing this, the customer immediately runs away, apologizing and saying she has to leave. Yoeo then scolds the idiot, asking if he even knew what he was doing, since she overheard their conversation. Kiao asks her, wait a moment. He wonders if that customer was actually trying to hit on him, and the girl confirms that yes, she was. If she hadn't shown up in time, his life would have turned into one of effortless luxury. Wu places her hand on the boy's head and tells him that if he really is short on money, he could always rely on her as long as they play like they used to. Kiao immediately refuses, saying that he isn't out of money. However, the girl insists that if he ever is, he's always welcome. She gets plenty of money every month. Just then, Cheng arrives and sees the scene. As they continue talking, Kiao tells her that if she has so much money to throw around, she should donate it to people in need. But the girl pouts, saying that he was so happy with that rich woman earlier. At that moment, Chen comments that the two seem to be getting along well. Yoeo's mother asks if they would like to have dinner together and then moves closer, saying that it's on her. Already in the car on the way to the restaurant, Cheng asks Gao how he felt about work today, and the boy responds that he felt fine. Yoeo tells her mother that she thinks Bai has the potential to be the bakery's poster boy, since he could double the number of rich female customers. Right after, her mother asks her little piggy if she isn't tired, considering that she stayed up all night. Yoeo tries to deny it, asking her mother what she's talking about since she slept well last night, and besides, her mother wasn't in her room to know. Cheng explains that when she got up to get water last night, she heard her daughter wondering out loud about what she should wear the next day. Upon hearing this, the pink-haired girl quickly responds that that's just a line from a movie. She stayed up late watching a film in her room. Her mother then adds that she also heard her plotting how she was going to Baiko's house. At that moment, Yoeo pleads for her mother to stop talking, saying that if she continues, she'll jump out of the car. Cheng chuckles and agrees to stop. After dropping them off in front of the restaurant, Cheng tells them to go ahead and decide what they want to eat while she finds a parking spot. Then before leaving, she gives her daughter a thumbs up, telling her to go all in. Yoeo frowns, questioning if her mother is saying something weird again. Before driving away, Cheng waves and then speeds off, leaving the two standing there in awkward silence. Yoeo pulls out her phone and sees that her mother sent a message saying she just realized it's the weekend and that finding a parking spot might be tough, so she's heading home first. Our protagonist interrupts, questioning what's going on, but Yoeo immediately realizes what just happened. She steps back, saying it's nothing, and then comments that the boy is very disciplined, as he hasn't touched his phone at all. She asks if he doesn't have any games to play. The boy replies that, unfortunately, at his age, he can't tolerate mobile games anymore, and that he already talked to his sister this morning. Until tomorrow, no one is going to call him. Hearing this, the girl looks confused. If no one is going to call the boy, that means Ningyi won't be sending any messages either, which is odd for a couple. Sometime later at the restaurant, Yoyo places her order and thanks the waitress for her service. The woman prepares to ask if our protagonist wants anything else. However, she immediately notices a present on the table and, misunderstanding the situation, quickly tells Yoyo that she will fetch their order right away. Meanwhile, Kiao is on the phone with his sister, and Lulu tells him that he can eat something outside first, and that when she gets home, she'll cook his favorite dish. Our protagonist replies that if this keeps up, he's going to turn into a completely useless person. Lulu tells him it would be better if her brother became someone useful. Then she asks if the boy is going out again to play with some cunning little fox. At that moment, the young man realizes that he is literally doing exactly what his sister was complaining about. He is on a date with Yoyo. Just then, Lulu's friend arrives, asking who she is talking to, and then greets Xiao, saying it's Xiao. She explains that just a little while ago, his sister was in a panic, saying she was going to ditch all her friends and go home early. Not wanting to be exposed, Lulu abruptly hangs up the phone. Upon hearing this, the pink-haired girl says that the boy is extremely attached to his sister, practically a siscon. The boy simply thanks her for the compliment, and then the girl tells him to eat more vegetables. We then see that the young girl is taking all the meat from the dishes and leaving only the vegetables for our protagonist. Kadao sighs and says that, unfortunately, that behavior isn't even surprising anymore. Yoyo asks what's so weird and why he's staring at her so much. The boy then concludes that the girl is a picky eater, and the young woman asks what's wrong with that. She stands up ready to show off her body while declaring that she's grown a lot. At that moment, we see that Baikao also stood up, and it's clear that he is significantly taller than Yoao. Feeling humiliated, the girl calls the boy despicable and says she's going to crush him. Our protagonist replies that he didn't even say anything, but suddenly a voice interrupts, asking them to stay in that position. We see that the waitress has returned with a camera, and the other waiters are dressed for a birthday celebration. As she takes a photo of them, she remarks how cute they look together. The two young people are utterly confused by the situation, and the waitress explains that this is a special service they offer at the establishment. She asks if she should start singing, and Kao prepares to clarify that they aren't celebrating a birthday. However, the young man turns and sees the present on the table. Piecing the clues together, he realizes that the waitress must have completely misunderstood the situation. He tries to explain that this is a misunderstanding, but Yoao says that actually it's not so bad. She steps on the boy's foot to stop him from saying anything else, silencing him. Yoyo picks up the cake and claims that it was made exclusively for a special event, asking for the waitress's help to cut it. Sometime later, we see that the cake is decorated with small figurines of Yoao and Kiao, along with a photograph of the two of them together. The waiters pop confetti, and Yoao announces that she and Kiao have known each other for almost 947 days, and it has been a lot of fun. Our protagonist realizes that the girl remembered all the days they spent together, then concludes that she really is just an adorable idiot. Later, we see the two walking through the city streets while eating ice cream. Admiring their photo together, Yoyo looks genuinely happy about everything that happened. Kiao remarks that today's ice cream tastes much better compared to the one they had last week. The girl agrees, saying that this is the best ice cream she's ever had in her life, but then she remembers something. She asks if Cho is going to ask her about some secret, or if they are going to play a secret sharing game since he's being unusually nice. The young girl also questions what kind of secrets the boy would even want to know, but our protagonist can only wonder how this conversation even got here. He says that in reality he just doesn't quite understand her and asks what she likes about him. Caught off guard, the girl seems incredibly flustered, unsure of how to respond, and asks why he's suddenly asking such an embarrassing question. Yoyo thinks that this situation feels like waiting for her favorite book to be released. However, the bookstore owner has decided not to sell the book to her, but still wants to hear her praise it and explain what's so good about it. Still, she says that if he really wants to know, that's fine. But in exchange, she also wants to know one of his secrets, specifically, whether he and Ning truly have feelings for each other. Yoyo explains that liking someone is a type of emotion that can't be seen or touched. There's no way to judge things solely based on someone's behavior, like a scale. The value on the scale gradually shifts closer to a good feeling when you get to know someone. This kind of feeling is normal among classmates and friends, but then the balance can suddenly tip, and that friendship can turn into another kind of affection. She explains that there are always groups of people in the world who think that everything others do needs an explanation. If someone likes another person and they end up together, that kind of group doesn't accept it as something natural. Instead, they question what these people even see in each other, since, in their minds, none of it makes sense. However, there are plenty of ordinary people in the world who fall in love, not as heroes saving the world or as the most beautiful people in the city. Because normal love is built up through daily routines, a small stream that gradually converges. It's the result of little and big things that people do together which accumulate in the heart. Then she explains that if she had to list those things, the first thing that made her fall for someone was Hyo's appearance. Another could be the day she learned his shoe size, or even the moment she saw his goofy smile after bumping into someone. She says that when she realized it and looked at him and he looked back at her, she could no longer see where the list began. However, it was as if this list had grown infinitely, filled with all the little things that made her fall for him. Returning to the present moment, Yoyo asks if Kiao and Ning really don't have feelings for each other. The young man asks what she's talking about, and she simply replies that she wasn't sad because he rejected her confession. She explains that after confessing to him, she thought a lot about it, about them being friends and how, if there were any issues, they would stay that way for a while. However, she states that they couldn't stay friends forever because after a long time, it would only become harder and harder to talk about romantic matters with him. Yoyo says that people around her told her that confession is a means of winning, not a competition, but she doesn't think so. She has been thinking of a plan that, if it works, will allow her to win. However, Yoeo comments that even if she loses, the friend zone situation won't last forever, and she will feel good knowing she at least tried. And as long as the boy doesn't hate her, anything is possible. Kao says that even so, she hasn't considered the possibility that he might already have a girlfriend. The girl asks why her friend always treats her like a complete idiot, then immediately pinches his ear. She says she feels better now and adds that it was strange for him to suddenly fall for his schoolmate named just 2 days after rejecting her. Yoeo also points out that she hasn't seen him interact much with Ning, and that's not normal behavior for people in love. It's very suspicious. Bai comments that regardless, it's still a fact that he's dating Ming, even if it's difficult to deny. But Yoeo asks what would happen if she found out that the two of them weren't actually dating. Qiao asks for a moment, and the girl replies that's fine. Then she says that if Qiao and his girlfriend are caught in a lie, they shouldn't blame her. She also adds that, by the way, she wasn't sad about being rejected by him. What truly scared her was the idea of being hated by him. The young man reassures her that he doesn't hate her. With that, the girl says that's all and then walks away, saying that they'll see each other at school. Initially irritated, the young man wonders to himself how that damn girl found out, and at that moment, Lulu calls our protagonist. Lulu asks her big brother to come to her immediately. Sometime later, we see a hot spring, and while streaming live, Lulu begins filming herself and showing her brother. She announces that today is the live broadcast of the Hot Springs battle, and then asks her big brother to say hi to her followers, which he does. Xiao introduces herself, saying she's also there and asking everyone to look at her. The girl jumps into the pool, splashing water all over those around her and causing a mess. Annoyed, Lulu scolds her friend, saying she was streaming and that she shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. Her brother looks confused and asks why she suddenly wants to do live streams. The young girl explains that when she went to see her brother last week, she saw something happening near the school. She remembers seeing a girl, for some reason, filming her brother while he was running. That's why she thought that maybe the boy had an interest in live streaming and perhaps it would make him feel better. Kao wonders why this drama sounds so familiar. He seems confused and asks what's going on, and the young girl says she received another unexpected confession. Hearing that word, he immediately turns to Xiao to see if she was the one who did it. Receiving that intimidating glare, Xiao looks quite uncomfortable. Immediately, she responds that it wasn't her who confessed to the protagonist's sister. The boy asks Lulu if she was the one who got rejected. However, the girl replies that she wasn't the one who turned someone down, and the boy congratulates her. Suddenly, the young girl asks her brother if he currently has someone he likes. The two of them exchange glances for a brief moment, and silence fills the air. Immediately, Bai Qiao turns away, saying that he doesn't like anyone and asks why she's bringing that up out of nowhere. The girl says she can tell that lately her brother has been acting strangely, especially since he even came home after school at different times. The boy says it's nothing, explaining that he has recently been overloaded with student council work. Right after, Xiao calls the boy over. A little farther away, the young girl tells her big brother that he should take care of his health, as he has no idea how much she worried about it. Very confused by this sudden situation, the boy says he's fine and asks what she means. Xiao also seems confused and asks if he hasn't been feeling sick lately. Our protagonist misunderstands and asks if the girl came as a spy for his sister. However, the girl responds that she'll explain what's going on. She says that Lulu hasn't been acting normal lately. She's been arriving late to school several times, and when classes end, she disappears. Xiao explains that she thought Lulu's brother was sick, and that the girl was probably taking care of him. Then she backs the boy into a corner. She asks him to stay healthy so that she can see her friend more often after school. The young girl bids him farewell, saying she'll head back first, and then asks him to take care of Lulu's issue. The protagonist wonders what's going on. Suddenly, a familiar scent reaches Qiao, and when he looks to the side, he sees Yoeo at the hot springs talking to a boy. She immediately turns around, noticing Bai Qiao's presence, and becomes very excited about the situation. The young girl exclaims that this must be fate, and then launches herself at him for a hug. Seeing those two planets approaching him, our protagonist stops the girl by holding her face. Suddenly, the girl starts inspecting her classmate's body, claiming that this is a perfect opportunity for it. She notices that the boy doesn't have any strange marks on his body, but observes something different about his swimwear. The girl comments that this swimsuit isn't Ning's favorite style, which is very suspicious. Putting her arm around her classmate, she claims that she almost caught him red-handed, while Ko pretends to be clueless. At that moment, the boy hears his sister talking to her friend and realizes something. He thinks that if Lulu sees Yoeo there, a massive problem will arise. After looking to the side, he notices a dark room and decides to head there. The young man grabs his classmate's hand and leads her toward the room, while Yoeo remains completely lost. He locks himself in the sauna and tells his friend that they will hide there for a while. Inside the room, he is seen hugging Yoeo while covering her mouth so she won't say anything. The girl's skin starts sweating profusely in the heat, and she calls out to Bai Qiao. Feeling very uncomfortable, she complains that it's way too hot for her in there, until the boy notices the temperature gauge on the wall, realizing the room is at 30 degrees. Outside the bathroom, Xiao tells Lulu that her brother is definitely around there somewhere, and that she'll try searching for him again. Sometime later, we return to the city, inside a luxurious apartment. We see two familiar planets and someone, for some reason, doing physical exercise. A very recognizable head of white hair can be seen as a girl takes a yoga class. While drying herself with a towel, she notices a notification on her phone and turns to check it. Her phone's wallpaper features none other than our protagonist, and the notification reveals that Lulu has started a live stream. With a mischievous smile, the girl seems to be plotting something quite devious in her mind. Xiao was quite confused since Kao was just there a moment ago and asked if her friend is going out to buy food. Our protagonist calls his sister and says he went to the bathroom, but is back now, then asks where they disappeared to. He tells her to come back quickly because the world is full of bad people and the girl is quite happy with her brother's concern. But she also thinks it's strange that he went to the bathroom without saying anything. Xiao asks if they can head back now and Lulu agrees. At that moment, Xiao feels relieved. However, his problems are far from over. When he looks ahead, he sees his classmate completely passed out. The young man starts removing the overcoat she was wearing so that she's left only in her bikini and can breathe more easily. He considers the possibility that this might have been one of his classmate's schemes, but he decides to help her anyway. Right after, our protagonist picks the girl up in his arms and starts carrying her on his back. Kirao explains that, in short, everything is under control again, and we see that he has placed Yoeo on a bath chair. Inside one of the hot springs, he thinks that everything is finally fine, until he notices a small boat floating beside him. Picking it up and reading the note inside, he finds a message from a certain fox questioning why Kiao hasn't come to talk to her, asking if she has to come after him instead. Reading this, he looks to the side and notices the student council president nearby wrapped in a rather sensual towel. Our protagonist glances back and sees Xiao playing with his sister, so he decides to put an end to this mess. He gets up and starts leaving the pool, but his sister asks where he's going. Bai Kiao lies, saying he urgently needs to use the bathroom. He comments that he can't hold it anymore and dashes away, leaving Lulu completely puzzled. As he approaches his classmate, he asks the president if she was looking for him. The girl plays dumb, saying that she just happened to find the vice president there, so she wanted to say hi, and she asks if he ran to her because he missed her. The boy replies that if she doesn't actually need anything, he'll be leaving, and upon hearing this, she looks completely disappointed by his reaction. Tang Xin grabs his arm, asking him to wait immediately because she has something to say. She tells him that her bath towel is about to fall off and asks for his help. She then asks if the vice president could hold it for her, but the boy refuses, saying she should just ask the receptionist for some clips. In his mind, Kiao thinks that if Lulu sees this, it will be the end of world peace, which is already difficult to maintain. Tang Xin then gets an idea and starts loosening her towel, revealing what's underneath. Seeing this, Bai Kiao immediately turns away in embarrassment, thinking that for some reason, the girl isn't wearing anything. However, Tang Xin pokes his head and asks where exactly his little eyes are looking. But when he sneaks a peek to the side, he realizes that the girl is actually wearing a beautiful bikini. Noticing this, Tang Xin asks if it was hard to resist and questions whether the vice president thought she was naked. But before she can finish her sentence, our protagonist throws the towel back at her face, telling her to cover herself properly since others might see her. The girl lifts the towel and casually says that if the president wants to take a peek, it wouldn't be a problem. But at that moment, something happens. A voice calling out for Bai Kiao can be heard, and he immediately recognizes that it's his sister. Like a monster searching for its prey, the girl starts wondering where the boy has gone. Kiao immediately tries to come up with a plan, looking in all directions for a hiding place, but he realizes there's nowhere to go. He thinks of only one escape route, and Tang Xin asks what's going on since his sister is searching for him. At that moment, our protagonist jumps into the hot spring while holding his classmate's hand, pulling her in with him. He sinks into the water with her, making them both disappear. After that, the boy covers Tang Xin's mouth so she won't breathe too loudly. Lulu, the skilled hunter that she is, approaches the waters. She emits a terrifying aura, but she doesn't notice anything unusual. Elsewhere, Yoeo calls out for Bai Kiao, visibly furious that he left her behind. Angry, she shouts that she'll never forgive this betrayal. Meanwhile, Ningyai is silently observing the entire situation. Lulu continues scanning the water, looking for anything out of the ordinary. However, she doesn't see a thing. Kiao keeps his hand firmly over the president's mouth, ensuring she doesn't make a sound, which irritates her. The girl wraps her legs around Kiao's back, pulling herself closer to him. She drags the boy deeper into the water so they won't be noticed by the predator lurking outside. The young woman takes this opportunity to move even closer to Bai Kiao, attempting to seduce him. At that moment, she notices that the boy is running out of oxygen and comes up with a brilliant idea. Tang Xin declares that she'll lend him some air and prepares to kiss him. The president moves her lips toward the boy, but suddenly, a hand emerges from outside the water. This hand grabs our protagonist's shoulder, and both he and Tang Xin freeze in shock. However, the one who pulls him out of the water is Ning Yi, looking utterly confused by the situation. She asks Tang Xin how she ended up so close to her supposed boyfriend. Caught red-handed as she was about to kiss someone else's boyfriend, the girl stammers, struggling to find an explanation. The Slay Fox steps out of the hot spring, claiming that, as the owner of the place, she was merely showing the vice president around her spa facility. She then takes Bai Kiao's hand, saying they should go explore the area together. However, Ning grabs the boy's other hand, asking him to wait a moment. She questions whether Bai Kiao shouldn't be her boyfriend, putting him in an awkward position. Ning Yi states that regardless of everything, she could accompany the boy herself, meaning Tang Xin wouldn't need to worry about it. She mentions that she has something to discuss with Bai Kiao regarding the two of them, and asks if that would be a problem for Tang Xin. Feeling cornered, the young woman simply replies that it's fine, that she doesn't mind, and that she'll lend him for a little while. The president starts walking away, saying she'll be waiting for Kiao in their usual meeting spot. Our protagonist, still holding hands with his fake girlfriend, watches Tang Xin leave. On the other hand, the girl is absolutely furious, questioning why she had to run into Ning there. She continues walking around the area until she notices a strangely colored bush with a hint of pink. Being quite intelligent, she assumes that this is probably the girl Tangerine had spied on and reported to her earlier. Deciding not to interfere, Tang Xin simply watches as Yoeo approaches their protagonist while pretending to be a bush. Realizing that Yoyo is spying on Kiao, Tang Sin comments that it's a pretty good way to do it without getting caught. Back with Bai Kao, he asks Ning if she had seen Lulu, and the girl says she had. But since she predicted this type of situation would happen, she made up an excuse for her. She then asked Bai Kao if he knows any shops where they can print magazines on coated paper, leaving the boy confused. However, he explains that there seem to be several stores in the school district and asks if she wants him to accompany her to one. Upon hearing this, Ning remarks that when she was there last week, prices weren't great, just as Kao notices someone's presence nearby. Ning continues speaking, stating that, as the boy knows, the literature club's funds aren't in the best condition, so it's difficult to afford expensive things. At that moment, he notices Yoyo approaching and asks what she is doing there. The girl deliberately says that she came to spy on him. Thinking quickly, the boy says it's fine, that he'll take care of it, and asks if Ning wants to visit that store another day since it's time for him to go meet his sister. Ning agrees, but just as Kyo gets up, Yoyo puts her evil plan into action and suddenly grabs his foot. At the same time, Tang Sin arrives, saying that the two had been talking for a long time and that Cho might be thirsty. However, she drops the juice she was holding as she witnesses a shocking scene. She sees that Bai Kao is about to fall onto Ning, and the girl questions why they are leaving so suddenly. The boy starts falling toward his fake girlfriend's two oranges, thinking that this is going to cause a major problem. Just as he is about to land, someone yanks on his underwear, and it turns out to be Tang Sin. While leaning on Ning, the boy begs to be let go by his classmates and asks the president not to look. However, the girl says that if she lets go, he'll fall, and besides, no one wanted to see that sight. At that moment, Lulu watches the scene furiously. She questions her Manhwa about what is happening. All three of Bai Kao's classmates notice her, and the boy completely panics. He starts falling backward, dragging Ning with him, and declares that his life is over. Since everyone is so close together, Bai Kao ends up pulling all three girls into the hot spring. Isolated, he wonders if his life is truly coming to an end. The next day, Bai Kao says that the whole situation was really strange. In a flashback, after getting out of the water, even surrounded by women, Lulu acted completely normal with him. She calmly took the boy away without causing any drama or conflict with him or the other girls there. Back in the present, the boy comments that ever since the spa incident, his sister has been acting very sweet and gentle. At that moment, he places both hands on the girl's cheeks and calls her name. He states that, although he isn't some kind of masochist, his sister's reaction is a bit different from what he expected. The girl assumes he's talking about the spa incident and says that she thinks her brother, as the pathetic person he is lucky to have friends around him. Bai Kao asks if she's really not mad, and the girl responds that she's not. Lulu grabs her brother's bag, saying that it's late and time for him to go. She throws the boy out of the house, telling him to hurry up and get to school. She then says she'll be going to school with her friend Xiao. Watching his sister wave goodbye, the boy wonders to himself if she's really okay. After seeing her brother leave, Lulu seems to return to normal and looks very annoyed. On the way to school, the boy questions what she had said since Xiao had told him that Lulu hadn't been going to school with her recently. With this, he concludes that he'll have to figure out what his sister is thinking. At that moment, he comes across Ning Yi, who is sitting on a bench wearing a peculiar outfit. The girl, as majestic as ever, stays occupied until she notices his presence and looks at him. Immediately, she stands up, adjusts her hair, and calls the boy's name. Bai Kao, on the other hand, is completely paralyzed by the young woman's beauty. As they walk together, he asks why she is dressed like that, and she explains that she promised to model for the Chinese clothing club. But she was worried about being late for their meeting, so she decided to put on the outfit beforehand. Bai then says that, upon seeing her, he almost mistook her for Yukino. The girl turns to him and asks if he is implying that she has a noble face, making the boy flustered. He stammers, trying to deny that's what he meant, and the girl simply laughs. Ningyi says she was just joking, since they are only a fake couple. As they walk together, Bai Kao says that based on the directions, the nearest printing shop should be that way. At that moment, Ningyi gently tugs on the boy's shirt. She prevents our protagonist from being run over by a car, but because of that, the young man ends up losing his balance. He ends up falling in the direction of the girl, barely managing to hold on. The two almost kiss because of it and become extremely embarrassed by the situation. Ningyi and Bai Kao step away until the girl says that he almost crossed on a red light, and the young man thanks her for the help. In his head, he thinks that this girl really had quick reflexes and feels extremely embarrassed. Already at the printing shop, the vendor says that if she wanted it printed, the cheapest price he could offer for 150 copies was our $2,700. He states that, as she could see, they were busy for a few days, and if she wanted the printing for the following week, he couldn't lower the price any further. Finally, the man comments that this was his offer, as if she wanted something cheaper, it wouldn't work, because if the quantity was too low, he would lose a lot of money. Ningyi simply responds that the price is not what she expected and leaves. While shielding herself from the sun, she sits on the bench next to Bai Kao, and the boy asks if the price remains the same, to which she responds yes. Our protagonist states that he will try to handle it, and the girl says she doesn't think it will help. Kao changes his hairstyle and says that the shop owner hadn't seen him yet, so he was going to give it a try. Bai arrives at the place asking the owner how much he would charge for 120 double-sided copies. The man responds that the price would be our $2,162, and that he could lower it to our $2,160. The man inquires when Xiao would want it and states that the shop was currently busy, and if the boy didn't make a reservation, the price would probably go up. Our protagonist thinks that he was setting a trap, so Kyo responds that the price for this paper was a bit high, and besides, the paper was not of good quality. He states that compared to that establishment, the price at the shop near the university entrance was 30% cheaper. Bai then says that if he added 50 more copies at the university entrance shop, it would be cheaper than 120 copies there. The man tries to respond, but Kidao interrupts him and says that if he could offer a better price, he would place an order for his shop every month. After making several arguments, Baikao says that if the man accepted this, he would place another order next month. With this proposal, the manager starts to feel tempted, until at that moment, we see that Ning was observing the entire scene. The girl was quite embarrassed, as if feeling a spark of love igniting in her heart. Suddenly, an unknown figure arrives, interrupting the situation and asking Ning what she was looking at. We then see someone touching Ning's face, and the girl calls this person's sister and says her greeting was too invasive. A blonde-haired girl questions what the girl was talking about, saying that they hadn't seen each other for almost a month, and her sister was very mean for not even calling her when she arrived. From a distance, our protagonist sees this scene and someone approaches him from behind, telling the boy not to worry. We then see that this person was Xiaokyu, a student from the literature club, and the girl says that Xiaokun is always like that and that she needs to recognize people by touching their skin. The girl comments that Xiaokun is like two dogs that need to sniff each other to determine who they are, so Kiao shouldn't mind it. As Xiaokun turns around and notices our protagonist's presence, then we see that the girl was a student at the medical university and a member of the literature club. Xiaokyu states that they have a very good relationship with Ming and comments that the girl became the president of the literature club because she and Xiaokun insisted a lot. Xiaokun turns and walks toward Kiao, asking if that was little Bai, saying afterward that back in school, she was embarrassed, but now she wanted to feel what it was like to have little Bai in her hands. On the other hand, Ning holds the girl back by an elastic on her leg and asks Xiaokun to wait. She asks her superior to avoid playing around in the exhibition hall and prevents the girl from hugging Bai Kiao. The blonde girl turns, questioning why she had that cold and stern expression again, since they were all friends and she wanted to recognize the boy. Watching the entire scene, Xiaokyu just smiles and then asks if she could talk to the boy alone. In another place, she states that she can't believe that Ning took the initiative to ask the boy for help, as that was quite rare. The young woman asks what the boy thinks about Ning, and our protagonist seems reluctant to answer. In his head, he thinks that he suddenly faced a very difficult question. After all, he had only met the girl a few days ago. The boy also thinks that Ning makes him feel good, as she always has a calm expression, and somehow, even though she is cold, she is always caring. He then tells Xiaokyu that Ning is a very kind person, and the girl asks what else he thinks. The boy comments that she is very nice, like a fairy, and extremely beautiful. Excited, Xiaokyu responds that despite Ning seeming a bit cold and not very cheerful, that was just her appearance, and Bai Kiao wonders if Ning has other sides to her. The young woman continues saying that it seems like Bai Kiao is having trouble noticing, but when he gets closer to her, he will understand. Besides, it was the first time she had seen Ning go out with a boy. Kidao responds that they were only there to buy some things for the literature club. Xiaokyu comments that the boy had a very serious style but was really cute. While gently patting Bai Kiao's head, the girl finishes by saying that she will leave Ning in his care. Elsewhere, walking with her fake boyfriend, Ning asked Bai Kiao how things were going with Yoeo, and the boy replies that they were just walking around. Going back to talking about that day at the spa, the boy thanks her for her help. Suddenly, Ning asked Bai Kiao if he is aware of what it feels like to be in love with someone. She also asks if he even knows what that feeling is, and the boy looks confused. Kiao thinks that maybe exploring these questions is just one of her sentimental ideas, as the girl always likes to ask these kinds of questions. He then states that emotions are probably interactions with things and the amount of empathy that can be generated in the heart. Ning then asks if facial expressions are the only way to show feelings, and the boy responds that they are not, since it is also possible to express them through physical contact. She starts touching her own face and tries to shape an extremely cute expression, succeeding masterfully. Our protagonist just stares at the scene, not exactly understanding what the girl was trying to do. The two look at each other, and Bai Kiao seems extremely happy with the situation, but already tired of it. The girl sighs and apologizes for doing that. She says that she was thinking that since they were in a fake relationship, she should make a cute face because Bai helped her, but it seems like she failed. The boy thinks that, on the contrary, it was very cute. Sometime later, we see the two walking again, and the young man asks if the girl had any plans for that afternoon. She responds that she will probably help the Chinese Cultures Club later, and Kiao replies that he was going home to play video games. They continue talking until they say goodbye. At that moment, we see that nearby, Lulu was just observing the scene. Then we see Bai Kiao's sister, for some reason, making a phone call to someone. A few hours later, we see Kiao lying on the couch until someone calls him. The young man asks what it is, and this person says that there is now a very important matter they want him to take care of. Elsewhere, a photo session is taking place with Ning posing for the Chinese Cultures Club. Lulu is there, just watching the scene with her phone in hand as if she is plotting something malicious. Sometime later, we see that, on a train, several people, for some reason, are complaining about the stench coming from Kiao. The young man then comments that the extremely important mission his mother asked him to do was something he couldn't believe. We then see that this so-called mission was to pick jackfruits at his uncle's house, and that was what was emitting that unbearable stench. The boy comments that his uncle also lived very far away, but even so, there was something that surprised him more than that. In a flashback, he asks his mother if he really had to pick jackfruits, and the woman responds that yes, since Lulu said she was craving them. The woman explains why the jackfruits were at the boy's uncle's house, and he thinks that he couldn't believe that he and his sister were being compared. Our protagonist, back in the present moment, states that he should let his sister know where he is, and right after calls her. The young woman seems to get a little nervous about the call, and the boy asks where she is at that moment. Through the call, the boy hears several noises, and Lou says she is at the market and asks what he wants to eat tonight. However, our protagonist thinks that class just ended a short while ago and wonders how she got to the supermarket so quickly, then asks where exactly she is. The girl lies, saying that she got a test today and that when she finished, she was allowed to leave early. Shortly after, she hangs up the call. The boy starts investigating the case and states that the background noise on the phone was definitely not from a supermarket. He remembers that Xiao said Lulu had been arriving late at school and leaving early, and says that this was not a coincidence because Lulu was hiding something. As he walks, he says that his sister made him go very far to pick up the jackfruit on purpose, and although it was difficult to hear the environment she was in, he can find her. Our protagonist begins climbing a staircase, confident that he will find his sister. Sometime later, he sees the girl through a glass window and states that his deduction was indeed correct. However, the boy notices something and realizes that next to her was Ning Yi. Confused, Bai wonders how they know each other. Inside, Lu asks Ning if they can continue their conversation, and then asks if the girl could kindly break up with her brother. Silence fills the room until Ning simply asks why. Lulu explains that her brother told her that there was no one he liked at the moment, which meant that her brother probably didn't have feelings for the girl. The girl states that she doesn't know if Ning has some hidden motive or if she has something she wants to do with Bai Kao. But now the young woman needs to break up with the boy immediately. She says that her brother is not interested in being in a relationship, at least for now. Kiao, who's nearby, just watches without knowing how to intervene. Ning simply shakes her head in denial without saying a word. Bai Lu becomes extremely irritated by this and stands up. She places a card on the table and states that there are 10,000 in that card. The young woman comments that the password is her brother's birthday and that if Ning needs money, she can take it, but she should do it quickly. Seeing this, Bai Kao questions why his sister has so much money and says that it seems like things will start to fall apart if he doesn't interfere right now. Ning prepares to say something but is interrupted by someone calling for Lulu. Bai Kao arrives at the scene, and when she turns around, Bai Lu realizes who is there. Her expression changes completely and she looks shocked and extremely nervous. Embarrassed, the girl grabs the card and runs away, leaving Bai confused. The young man keeps calling his sister to stop her from running, but it's already too late. On the other hand, his fake girlfriend grabs his hand, pulling him to a corner. Ning simply says that they should hurry, and so the girl starts running after Bai Lu. While chasing his sister, the boy says that honestly he has some regrets, and one of them is not telling Lu about his fake relationship. He states that he realized Lulu wanted to confirm if he liked Ning during that conversation they had, and in other words, Lulu already knew about Ning's existence. The young man, confused, wonders where the girl could have gone and thinks that the place she went to is where she goes when she is sad. Then, he remembers something. We then see Kyo's sister swinging on a children's playground swing, and the young woman has a sad expression. Suddenly, someone arrives at the scene saying that they are very hungry and wondering if his sister will cook for him today. Lulu recognizes the voice of this person and prepares to run immediately. Our protagonist states that if she runs, he will ignore her forever, and she immediately stops. The young woman turns around with a sulky face, not knowing what to say, and goes back to her swing. She asks how Kao found her, and the boy says that he followed someone's tracks and ended up there. Bai Lu takes a piece of bread from her bag and gives it to the boy, saying that if he is hungry, he can eat. While eating, the boy says that he has something to tell the girl, but immediately she takes something else out of her bag. Lulu shoves a drink into the boy's mouth, saying that the bread seemed too dry. Once again, he tries to return to the subject, stating that he really has something to tell her. However, this time she takes out an apple, stopping him from speaking once again. The girl states that the fruit is healthy and that he really needs to eat it. And almost crying, the girl pleads for her brother not to hate her. However, looking at the sky, the boy says that, as her brother, he will never forgive her. The girl starts crying, dropping the apple and saying that she understands. She comments that she was already prepared to be hated by her brother and states that after they returned from the spa, she started following her brother every day. Lulu says that she researched on the school forum to find out which girls he usually went out with and thought she could pay Kyo's girlfriend to break up with him. The girl starts wiping her eyes while saying that she hates herself and that she thought she was prepared to be hated, but now she was crying like a baby. However, the boy approaches, placing his hand over the girl's hand and saying that he will never forgive her. He states that he will never forgive her for buying jackfruits without asking him first. Our protagonist starts explaining that watermelons are much better than jackfruits and that if she keeps crying, she will never get out of this situation. The girl asks him to wait and says she didn't think he was talking about that. Bai states that although the girl excels in her studies, he is much smarter in finances and that besides fruits, there are many things she doesn't know. Right after, he tells his sister that he and Ning are just friends. The young man comments to himself that after that, he carefully explained his fake relationship with Ning to Lulu. He also states that his sister asked why he didn't take photos with Ning to tell others that she was his girlfriend. However, he states that he had no choice but to lie because the person who confessed to him was Yoeo, who also knew Lulu. The young man mentions that in the end, Lulu asked the question that worried him the most, and we see that the girl asked how long he would continue with his fake girlfriend. Bai responds that he wasn't sure, since even though his problem was solved, he still hadn't done his part for Ning. Lulu says that apparently the boy was very popular, and our protagonist thinks that no matter how old she is, he will always think that. The The girl stands up, opening her arms to receive a hug from her brother. The boy comments that when she starts acting like a spoiled brat, he always remembers her younger, always pestering him. The two siblings then share an extremely sweet hug. Lulu looks at her brother with an excited expression and asks them to go home immediately. Sometime later, we see the boy thinking that in this way, he once again saved the world from a giant crisis. And besides that, he says that he has gone back to being as careless as ever. Suddenly, while the boy is casually sleeping on the desk in the classroom, something happens. At that moment, those two boys who intimidated Kyo the other day finally arrive, waking him up. The two state that they have bad news, and the young man asks why their hair has been cut. The blonde one starts crying, saying that it's all his fault since the student council was punishing anyone who didn't follow the school rules and they were victims. However, the big guy says that it's not the time to talk about that, and the boy tells his friend Xiao that he has a life or death choice in front of him. Thus, the boy asks if our protagonist would prefer Tang Xin or Yo Weao. Sometime later, we see that in a room, Tang Xin, Yo Weao, and another woman are gathered. The girls suddenly hear footsteps approaching, and looking to the side, they see who it is. Kiao arrives, greeting everyone in the room and saying that he heard they wanted to see him. A teacher explains to Bai that on that day they would have a cooking class for all the students in his grade, but unfortunately, there weren't enough classrooms. Therefore, the woman states that she planned to divide the students from his class into two groups and mix them with two other classes, with Yo-Yo and Tang as representatives of each. The woman concludes that if the boy agrees, he can go and separate his classmates into two groups, and in his head, he feels relieved. However, immediately, he tells himself to wait because there is an even bigger problem there. He realizes that he almost forgot about his biggest problem, and when he looks back and sees his two friends, he states that he has to choose one of the classes to join. Looking at Tang Xin, the boy thinks that she looks very intimidating right now and seems to have something up her sleeve. However, he also looks at Yo-Yo and states that the girl still looks very scary, but she is definitely safer than that white fox. The young man then asks his teacher to wait a little bit, as he needs to discuss with his classmates what they think would be best. However, interrupting our protagonist, Tang Xin raises her hand, calling for the teacher. The girl admits that splitting Kyo's classmates into two groups is efficient, but she thinks it won't work because they will be excluded by the other classes during the selection. She then asks if our protagonist agrees with this, and the boy simply thinks that the students aren't so vulnerable as to be offended by that. However, the naive teacher agrees, saying that the girl has a point, but Bai Kyo becomes quite irritated by this. Finally, the teacher asks if Tang Xin has any other ideas, and the girl says yes. She begins saying that it's just a humble opinion, and at that moment, we see that Bai Kyo has already fallen into the trap. After the discussion, the boy thinks that in the end, Tang Xin's scheme was approved, and the three classes were randomly shuffled and placed into two rooms. He states that it was really random, but at that moment, we see that in his room, both Yo-Yo and Tang Xin are present. Right after, the teacher asks if everyone is there, says that it's time to start, and asks the students to form groups and line up. A crowd immediately spreads out to form groups with the people closest to them. Our protagonist's two friends leave a bunch of aprons for him to hand out while thanking him for his help. Bai Kyo, irritated, asks where they are running off to so fast. The orange-haired one replies that he is kind-hearted and can't stand seeing Yo-Yo in danger, so he's going to help her. Meanwhile, the blonde one replies that he also sees that Tang Xin is in trouble, and that this is his chance to be her hero. Even so, Bai Kyo grabs the two, asking if they are blind, and states that there is a pile of people around them and that they won't be able to get into their group. He orders them to give up and tells them they will form a team, but everyone gets irritated. Suddenly, Tang Xin arrives, and with her sensual aura, asks if they have found a group yet. Bai Kyo's two friends immediately respond that they haven't, desperate for the girl to join them. The girl replies that she has had some trouble finding a group too, and asks if she can join them. However, without wasting any time, her rival also arrives at the scene, and Yo-Yo apologizes. She also asks if she can join while making an extremely cute expression. The orange-haired boy, completely in love, falls to the ground, while his friend tries to see what happened to him. Extremely happy, the boy simply replies that love has literally knocked on his door. After everyone forms a group, the teacher asks if everyone was able to find a team. She notices that Tang Xin, Yo-Yo, Kyo, and his two friends are left and states that their workspace is a bit too small for a group of 5. The teacher asks the boys which of the 3 know how to cook, and immediately, the orange-haired one volunteers. The blonde one doesn't hold back either and begins his speech, saying that he is a renowned chef. The teacher then asks Bai Kyo if he knows anything, but the boy says just the basics. Immediately, the teacher becomes happy, realizing that this strategy will work very well. She informs Bai Kyo's two friends that if they both know how to cook well, there will be no problems with them forming a team. Finally, she states that Bai Kyo, Yo-Yo, and Tang Xin will form another team and work together to complete the class. Immediately, Yo-Yo runs to get the ingredients while our protagonist asks Tang Xin if this was one of her schemes. As all of this happens, two hands grab Kyo's shoulders and an ominous aura can be felt. Bai Kyo's two friends warn that they will be watching his every move until the end of the class. The boy starts to feel truly frightened by all that overwhelming pressure. While Yo-Yo and Tang Xin cook, the blonde one approaches his friend and asks Xiao if he knows Tang well, then starts bombarding him with several questions about the girl. Our protagonist thinks that the girl is spoiled, mischievous, and likes to relax, but he doesn't know how to respond to that. The boy starts feeling pressure on his back, and when he turns around, he sees the president staring at him while spinning a knife. The young woman makes some rather impressive movements and displays a terrifying expression at the boy, sending shivers down his spine. Bai Kyo responds that Tang was beautiful and elegant both inside and out, and the blonde boy is very pleased. On the other hand, his other friend arrives, asking what he thinks about Yoeo and bombarding him with several other questions about the girl. Our protagonist thinks that the girl in question is a monster who directly confronted Ningyi after being rejected by him and someone who has no fear. However, while holding a knife, Yoeo also hears the conversation and Bai Kao notices this. The boy's friend doesn't let him off the hook, urging him to say directly what he thinks about the girl. Then, backed against the wall, the young man simply responds that the girl who confronted him was quite cute. Tang Xin calls Bai Kao and asks if, when he finishes playing with his friends, he could help them since there were two girls waiting for him. Bai Kao's friends become completely irritated, glaring at him furiously. At that moment, Tang begins pouring a drink into a cup and Yoeo just watches the scene. The pink-haired girl seems confused and curious about the drink and asks Tang Xin if she could reveal what she was drinking. The girl replies that it's a new soda flavor created by Bai Kao's father at the Agro-Science Academy. She reveals that she was planning to make chicken wings with soda for this class, so she brought the whole bottle, but there wasn't much left. Yoeo gets very excited about this, and seeing her reaction, the white fox becomes confused as the girl seemed very curious about it. In her head, the girl thinks that maybe little Tangerine was right and that Yoeo really did confess to Bai Kao. So she decides to test it, and shortly after, asks if the girl wants some of the soda. The girl asks if she can, and when she receives a yes, she gets very excited. She immediately bites the cup that was at Tang Xin's mouth, tilting the liquid straight down her own throat. An awkward situation unfolds until our protagonist interrupts, asking what the two are doing. They immediately separate, and Tang responds that they were just drinking soda, while Yoeo urges Kyo to hurry up and make his dish. Our protagonist, quite frightened by all of this, simply says that the girls are terrifying. Yoeo, talking to her new colleague, says that she and Bai Kao are members of the council, so the girl asks what he likes to do in the council room. The white fox gets very curious and asks why the girl is so concerned about knowing that. The girl replies that it's nothing. She was just curious as she thought she could take advantage of Tang Xin being there to ask. Bai Kao remains silent, feeling very uncomfortable with this awkward situation. Suddenly, Tang Xin approaches, touching the boy on his thigh and catching his attention. She prepares to reveal a lot about Kao, and the boy starts feeling uneasy. In his head, he wonders why he's the topic of conversation again and questions whether they could talk about games or life instead. However, fearing what might be revealed about him, Bai Kao just coughs, drawing the attention back to himself and says he's going to start cooking. Still, Tang Xin doesn't waste time and says that Bai Kao relaxes every hour, but he always does a great job, and he compliments her a little. In the end, Yoeo and the white-haired girl conclude that Bai Kao is just average, and the young man starts getting worried since they are now sharing the same opinion. He yells that it's time to add the seasonings, trying once again to end the subject. However, the fox continues, saying that speaking of which, Bai Kao is quite popular among the girls in their school, if she wasn't mistaken. And then she concludes that it seems like the girls in their class like that type of guy, and Yoeo gets annoyed by this. The girl asks if that's true, and Tang Xin asks if she hasn't heard about the famous school couple Bai Kao and Ming Yi. Then she asks Yoeo for her opinion on this. The young woman seems quite flustered, unsure of what to say, and Bai Kao becomes even more nervous. She simply responds that she thinks it's nice as long as they are in love with each other. It's none of her business. The president says that's true, but she is sure there is someone else who still has feelings for Bai Kao, but he already has a girlfriend, and that's a shame. And finally, the woman concludes that she thinks it's time for that person to give up, and Yoeo's world crumbles. Completely frustrated by this, she suddenly drops the knife she was holding. Even feeling uncomfortable, Yoeo responds that she can't agree with that. She states that relationships are complicated, and whether someone should give up or not is highly subjective. Tang Xin thinks that it seems like the rumors were true, and Bai Kao comments to himself that the fox probably already knew something and was going to use it against him. At that moment, Yoeo throws herself onto the president, saying she wants to know if, as a member of the student council, Bai Yo dating could be considered wrong. The girl also comments that if any proof is needed to punish the boy, she wouldn't mind being a witness for Tang Xin. The fox responds that to be fair, dating isn't prohibited. After all, the former president and vice president used to date. Yoeo adds that it's a shame, and Bai Kao gets increasingly irritated with this situation unfolding before his eyes. The teacher interrupts everyone, asking if she could have a minute of their attention. She informs the class that they have 10 minutes left before the lesson ends, and that after finishing, they should take photos of their dishes and send them via WhatsApp for evaluation. Tang Xin and Yao Liao take advantage of Bai and start snapping pictures of his dish. The boy tries to stop them, asking the girls not to submit his dish as if it were theirs. Then, Yoeo shows off a beautiful plate of food while stating that this special dish was made by her and asking if the boy wanted some. However, after taking a bite, the girl spits it out because it was way too spicy. After all, she was only a pastry specialist. Our protagonist becomes even more irritated. He then turns around, asking if Madam President did anything. Seeing the young woman searching for something under the counter, he asks her not to say she was just standing around doing nothing while waiting for him to finish. At that moment, Tang Xin pulls out a dish from under the counter, and for some reason, silence fills the room. She responds that the boy is mistaken, that she knows how to cook but was still preparing her dish, and that he should focus on his own cooking instead of stealing her skills. Suddenly, the boy notices something strange and sees that for some reason, Yoeo is pulling his hand toward a plate of food. The young man asks what she is doing, and the girl responds that she didn't bring her chopsticks, so she was using his hand to grab the food. At that moment, he realizes the situation he's in and asks the young woman to stop creating such a mess. He warns her that there were many boys around and asks if she wants him to get killed. Yoeo asks if Bai Kao wants to feed her, then immediately opens her mouth. Half a minute passes and still, nothing happens. The young woman keeps her mouth open, but sensing something strange, she opens her eyes. She realizes that Bag Kyo is happily eating his own food without giving her anything. Immediately, she lunges at him to attack for his cruelty, but he quickly puts food in her mouth, making her very happy. Right after, the boy asks the girl to let go of his hand, but she says she won't let go so easily. Suddenly, someone arrives, calling Yoeo Piggy. This woman pinches Yoeo's cheeks and says she was wondering why the girl didn't team up with her today. The woman then says that now she understands the reason. It was because Yoeo was in the team with her little boyfriend. We then see that this tall girl is a friend of Yao. She also adds that it looks like Yoeo's plan to have Kiao deliver the papers worked out with her help and asks how her friend plans to thank her. However, fearing exposure, the pink-haired girl starts pushing the woman away, saying she'll leave the rest to Bai Kiao and Tang Xin. Our protagonist remains stunned by everything he just witnessed. All at that moment, Tang Xin is rummaging around the kitchen. At that moment, she finishes her dish, and we see that, in reality, she only made a boiled egg. The girl lies, saying that she made a dragon egg, and that it's a type of molecular gastronomy dish. Kiao asks how she managed to make that in just a few minutes, and Tang says she's a culinary genius, asking if he wants to be fed by her, but Kiao refuses. Tang Xin, irritated, asks why her friend always resists when she tries to feed him and then says that she's starting to get angry. Furious, the young woman puts the food in her mouth and approaches Bai Kiao. She states that she will feed the boy mouth to mouth, as that way he won't be able to escape. Seeing this, the young man is completely shocked and worried about the situation. He declares that he won't do it and pleads with the president to stop, please. 30 seconds later, silence lingers in the room and Bai Kiao realizes he forgot something. Watching Van Dan Fox eat the food he made, the young man becomes completely enraged. Tang Xin praises the boy, saying that he's a great cook and that even so, it's still hard to believe. Then she asks if the boy would accept working in her house as a cook, stating that if he were willing to sign an 18-year contract, she would pay him a lot of money. Bai Kiao shouts, saying that it's way too long, and then questions if the girl is trying to get a slave. Meanwhile, we see that outside, Tang Xin is walking. Holding several books in her hands, the young woman hears that shout and realizes it's Bai Kiao. Mingyu starts peeking through the glass door and observes Bai Kiao. With a book in her hands, the young woman looks quite hesitant, unsure of what she should do. We see that she had taken notes on the instability of the fake relationship and that Yoeo was the one who most suspected that it wasn't real. At that moment, Tang Xin says that she wants to know how long the boy has known Yoeo, since they seem to have a good relationship, and Kiao responds that it's been a few years. The fox then asks how long he has known his girlfriend, and the young man gets confused. She clarifies that she's talking about Mingyi, and immediately, the boy realizes he almost forgot. Nervously, while wiping a knife, he responds that he thinks it's been about 2 weeks. Upon hearing this, Tang Xin starts piecing the puzzle together and remembers Tangerine talking about the day Bai Kiao rejected a girl. She states that, as expected, it was really a trick, and Kiao questions what she means by that. Centrally, she begins crawling across the table, trying to get closer to the young man to tempt him. The president claims that the boy is trying to escape the distraction zone and asserts that was just a random thought. At that moment, Bai Kiao ends up cutting himself and his finger starts bleeding non-stop, leaving the young man desperate. Tang Xin calls him an idiot, and then immediately starts pulling something out of the pocket of her skirt. She begins helping the boy, and Kiao says it's all her fault for saying something like that so suddenly. Changing the subject, Tang asks if the boy wants to come to her house, and the boy looks confused, asking why she's saying that. She brings her mouth close to the boy's wound while she begins to explain. For some reason, she starts sucking Bai's blood, leaving the boy startled and very confused. The fox then says that little Tangerine mentioned going to her house, but if Bai Kiao doesn't go, she will get angry. Finally, Tang Xin asks if the boy will come to her house. The young man then concludes that after practically being forced by that white fox to go to her house, he promised to visit her on Saturday. At night, at Bai Kiao's house, the boy thinks that he didn't know a crisis was awaiting him at home. At that moment, the boy opens the door. We then see that Lulu is dressed in a cat pajama set and holding a newspaper in her hands. Our protagonist asks what the girl is doing, and she stands up at that moment. Bai Lu walks up to Bai Kiao, grabbing his tie and starting to inspect something. She pulls the boy's tie, practically choking him and making him lose his balance. Shigao ends up falling backward and questions what she is doing, but the young woman continues examining his body. She then notices that there's a pink ribbon on his finger, looking like a bandage. While threatening her brother with a newspaper in her hands, the young woman asks if he did something with his girlfriend. The boy immediately responds that it's not possible since they are just a fake couple. On the other hand, the girl starts crying, saying that she was talking about him cooking without her and asks what he was thinking. Lulu comments that our protagonist even cooked for Ning, even though she's just his fake girlfriend, and questions if she wasn't the only one allowed to eat his food. The young man states that his sister doesn't need to worry since he only went out to buy ingredients because today's class was a cooking lesson and it had nothing to do with Ning. She then asks if the boy had ever cooked for a woman before, leaving Bai Kiao completely shocked. The boy responds no. Changing the subject, he asks if he can cook something, assuring his sister that the food will be great, and she agrees. In his head, Bai Kiao thinks that Lulu is just a little kid and that he only needs to console her since he seems to be a genius when it comes to making his sister happy. At that moment, he finishes dinner and thinks that this meal always works when he's too lazy to cook something more complex, and Lulu looks very excited. As he walks with the plate in his hand, the boy sees a notification on his phone. He looks at the smartphone screen but notices something that completely terrifies him. The boy sees a notification from Ning apologizing for bothering him and asking when Tang Xin would be free, as she, for some reason, wanted to talk to the fox. The next day, Bai Kiao rushes into the room called by Ning Yi. The young man asks what his friend meant by that message yesterday and why she went so badly to meet Tang Xin. The young woman, elegant as always, simply asks the boy to sit down, and he promptly agrees. Ning Yi asks if Bai Kiao still remembers the day she invited him to join the literature club, and the boy replies that he does. At that moment, a notification arrives on the boy's watch. It's his sister saying that danger is near and that Bai Kiao should stay away from his fake girlfriend. She continues talking, but our protagonist turns off the watch while apologizing, saying his sister is just joking. The girl says that, to be honest, she doesn't think it would be a good idea for the boy to join the literature club, since the student council wouldn't approve of it. Additionally, she says that if the boy is okay with it, she would like to talk to Tang Xin after Friday's class about it, and the boy agrees. He thinks that, to be honest, it would be difficult for him to talk to Tang about joining another club. The young man tells himself that even if he prepares and tells the truth, she will probably just ignore him, so it will be a great help if Ning Yi is there for him. In his head, the boy feels that something is strange, and at that moment, he remembers how she looked that day, as if something was bothering her. The boy also recalls what Xiaoqiu said about Ning. Additionally, he remembers his fake girlfriend's questions about love and admits he became very curious. Looking at the girl's face, the young man thinks that he wants to know more about Ning Yi's thoughts. At another moment, we see Xiaoqiu telling our protagonist that, in reality, Ning Yi is an airhead. Chao looks very confused as he was sure she was great at school and had also demonstrated her brilliant observational skills when they were at the shop. The girl replies that if she's not mistaken, Bai Kiao's first impression of Ning Yi was that she seemed cold, elegant, and enigmatic, and the boy agrees. However, Xiaoqiu says that the fact that he is meeting with her again is proof that the boy has doubts about his first impression, and the young man confirms it. At that moment, the girl states that before anything, he needs to seek help, and then we see someone pinching our protagonist's cheeks. That girl is Xiao Kun, and she is very excited to see Bai Kiao there. The girl asks what brought the young man there and if he came to visit a lonely graduate student. She gets extremely happy and comments that Bai Kiao deserves a reward, but at that moment, he asks her to stop. Suddenly, Xiaoqiu arrives at the scene and asks Xiao Kun to forget about that. She then asks if they want to play a game of volleyball, leaving Kiao very confused by the invitation, and Xiaoqiu says she will explain everything during the match. Preparing to receive the ball, Xiao Kun states that she loves volleyball. As Xiaoqiu gets ready to serve, our protagonist says he thought the girl was going to tell him more about Ning and asks why they are playing volleyball instead. She asks if the boy knows what Ning's parents do for a living, and the boy replies that Ning mentioned her father is a diplomat and her mother is a famous writer. Bai asks if, since they are busy with work, they neglect Ning. However, Xiaoqiu replies that they don't because no parents would hate their own daughter. She states that because her parents love her so much, they ended up limiting her social life and placed her in a light environment to grow up in. The two continue playing fervently, and Xiaoqiu adds that, in reality, her parents' work is also part of the reason. The girl explains that Ning was forced to travel with her parents due to their jobs, and because of that, she had to change schools constantly. This is also one of the reasons she doesn't have many friends she spends a lot of time with, and thus, her social circle became smaller and smaller as she grew up. Xiaoqiu explains that, in reality, she isn't cold, she's just bad at talking to others. Kiddo then asks what that has to do with her being an airhead, and she responds that the boy is about to receive the next ball, leaving him startled. Xiao Kun, without any mercy, jumps to spike the ball hard so that our protagonist won't be able to catch it easily. He immediately puts his arms in front of him to protect himself, stating that he doesn't know how to play that sport. The volleyball lightly hits the boy, making him stumble back and fall to the ground. The girl adds that, as someone who doesn't know how to play volleyball, he should instinctively dodge the ball if it comes flying at him. Upon hearing this, the boy says that he thinks he finally understands what she was talking about. He explains that because of her parents' suffocating love, Ning had no social interactions with the people around her. Moreover, she was forced to change schools very frequently, which limited her knowledge of socialization. Bai thinks that because of this, when faced with confessions, her first thought was to find a fake boyfriend to avoid them. Finally, he says that to the people around her, her actions were mistaken as cold and incomprehensible. Another way to look at it is that she became the quiet girl who hides behind books, and he was one of the people who barely understood her, which makes him quite sad. Xiaoqiu reveals that this is why she and Xiaohan invited Ning to join the literature club, because as the club president, she would have more opportunities to socialize. She also says that she noticed her friend was doing better at trying to socialize and then asks if Bai Kiao doesn't think Ning is the cutest and most lovable girl. The boy agrees, saying that she is really cute. Xiaohan wraps her arm around the young man and asks if they could leave Ning in his care and if he would take care of her. With that pressure suddenly placed on his shoulders, our protagonist just looks utterly confused about how to respond. Our protagonist thinks that after a small conversation with his seniors about Ning, he finally understands the girl a little more. After saying their goodbyes, the boy thinks that Ning isn't incomprehensible and in fact just has social anxiety. He states that maybe her love for literature isn't as great as they believed and that she was simply curious about how the world looks from other people's perspectives. Finally, he adds that not liking to socialize and not knowing how to socialize are two completely different things, and Ning just doesn't know how to express herself. The young man also tells himself that now that he finally understands the girl better, he's completely lost on how to get closer to her. The next afternoon at the school cafeteria, we see Bai Kiao telling his friends that he's going to buy a soda. He walks to the machine, presses the drink button, and then reaches his hand into the compartment where the can falls. However, someone steals the can of Coke. The white-haired girl simply hides it, and Bai Kiao demands to know how this person dares to steal his things. He grabs the girl's hand and declares that as long as she's breathing, even if she's a goddess, he will take her down. The president looks quite confused by this sudden attitude, while Bai Kiao remains determined. Tang Xin makes a mischievous expression, and Kiao understands her intentions. The young woman asks how long the boy plans to hold her hand. She states that she doesn't mind, but someone might see it and misunderstand. Then she comments that anyone who sees it will probably think that the boy is a worthless traitor, saying this out loud for everyone to hear. However, Bai Kiao won't let it slide. He grabs the girl's chin and pushes her against the wall. He states that there are a lot of people there and that they might misunderstand the situation. At that moment, the girl drops the soda can. The can hits the ground, spilling all over Tang Xin's skirt, leaving the girl stunned, while Bai Kiao, realizing the mess he made, looks very uncomfortable. On the other hand, with her body soaked in coke, the girl starts calling for our protagonist. Then, with a terrifying expression, she asks if the boy has a death wish. Furious, the young woman begins intimidating and yelling at the boy, who can only try to apologize. Sometime later, we see our protagonist try and talk to the girl, calling her president and saying he was thinking about something. However, the girl orders him to shut up, then says she doesn't want to talk to him. We then see that the two are walking back to back so that no one notices that the girl's skirt is wet. Bai says that if they keep walking like this, they'll become the center of attention and comments that he doesn't think there are any available tables. He asks if the girl wants him to bring food to her in the student council room, but the young woman responds that he doesn't need to worry about finding a place to sit. Tang explains that little Tangerine had already secured a spot before she went to look for the boy. Then she comments that luckily their tables were close to each other, and Bai Kiao realizes that, in reality, this was just part of her plan to be near him. We see that near the two, Bai Kiao's friends are also present, and the orange-haired one notices someone else sitting nearby. He points to Yoeo, who for some reason is wearing a bunny coat. We then see that the girl is also sitting next to Bai Kiao, and she states that fate is incredible. However, before she can finish her sentence, she notices several people looking at her, including Bai Kiao and Tang Xin. The young woman feels embarrassed and simply says that it was a coincidence, asking if the two were there as well. Bai Kiao comments that it really was a coincidence, and thinks that she will stay quiet as long as there are people around her, finally getting rid of another problem. Tang Xin responds that it really is a coincidence while wondering why Yoeo is there. Yoeo intertwines her leg with our protagonist and calls him an idiot. She whispers that she sent him a message asking him to wait for her that afternoon and demands to know why he didn't. The boy responds that he didn't check his phone because he was in class. However, she continues pressing her leg against his while calling him a liar. Another person approaches the table, and Bai Kiao's two friends recognize who it is, looking shocked. Nini approaches with her cold expression and states that there are no seats available in the cafeteria. She tells Bai's friends that if they've already finished eating, she wants to sit in their spot. The two boys immediately leave, and Yoeo becomes quite irritated with the girl's presence. A silence falls over the entire area, and the atmosphere turns into a battlefield. All the girls exchange furious glances while our protagonist is highly impressed by everything happening. Suddenly, Tang Xin thinks of something and asks little Tangerine if she's been managing the club's expense records. The orange-haired girl responds that yes, she updated the records 2 days ago and asks why the president is bringing this up. Tang then says that they've had to deal with a recession recently and have also received fewer donations from organizations. She asks if there's any way to reduce club expenses, and Tangerine realizes what her mentor is insinuating and simply asks what her plan is. The White Fox comments that there may be a way to solve this problem. After all, she recently discovered that some clubs were misusing their funds. She states that these clubs use their funds for inappropriate activities and adds that the name of the club that did this starts with L. Immediately, Kiao realizes her intentions, and Tang Xin says that if this club were dissolved, they could significantly reduce club expenses. The fox asks if Bai Kiao agrees, and Tangerine also says it sounds like a good idea. However, before that conversation can continue, Ning picks up a fry with her chopsticks and puts it in Kiao's mouth, asking him to taste it. Tang Xin and Tangerine are both highly startled and alarmed by this, feeling provoked. The girl then immediately asks her boyfriend if he likes the food. The young man looks quite embarrassed and just says yes, while Tang thinks that her rival didn't even acknowledge what she had just said. Ning sits back down and asks the president which club she was referring to. The girl dodges the question, saying that obviously it's the Club for Romantic Relationship Research, since such an illusory club should be banned as soon as possible. In his head, Kiao feels relieved that she finally spared the literature club, and then he says he feels sorry that the Love Research Club took all the blame. Yoeo also isn't satisfied with this, so she mimics Ning's action by forcing some food into Bai's mouth. She states that the meatballs are saltier than usual, she doesn't like them, and that's why she wants Kiao to eat them. The young man asks why he has to do that, and Yoeo simply says that he always eats her food whenever there's something she doesn't like. They continue arguing, and Ning thinks that although Yoeo is the biggest problem, she has to get closer to her. After all, she's one of her fake boyfriend's friends. So she decides to use a topic to start a conversation and shamelessly asks Yoeo if she's a picky eater. The young woman feels as if she is being directly challenged and offended by her rival, becoming quite irritated. Yoeo declares that she can't lose and then says that, as Ning can see, she is still growing. However, Ning ignores her and says that, in that case, that's not very good. With that, the pink-haired girl feels quite intimidated, questioning if she's being challenged and then stating that she didn't even do anything. The girl then realizes that this is probably Ning's plan to erase her doubts about their relationship, since Xiao is looking quite suspicious now. She then approaches our protagonist, asking if he has ever seen someone put things inside an inflated balloon, and the boy replies that he has. The young woman adds that as he knows a balloon only has air inside, it's empty, which makes it easy to put things inside. However, you can't simply poke a hole in the balloon. After saying this, she prepares to leave as if that was a warning that the boy would have to interpret. She turns around saying that she has to go, and Ning asks her boyfriend what the girl was trying to say. Kyo responds that he doesn't know either, but he immediately thinks that he understood it better than anyone else. The young man tells himself that the first half of the balloon metaphor meant that she was very angry, and the second half meant that she was doubting his relationship with Ning. The boy becomes irritated, wondering when she became a genius at riddles and how he immediately understood that. Tang Sin doesn't let it slide. She intertwines her legs over Kiao and says that she almost forgot, as there's something pending for the student council next week. She says that she doesn't know if Bai has noticed, but recently, some students have been running illicit businesses on school grounds. However, the school isn't against it. But as the president of the council, she believes that this should come to an end, and besides that, one of the council members is involved, and that person needs to be careful. Tangerine steps in, asking how the girl plans to deal with this problem. The fox says that they need to change the school rules to destroy all the couples at school. She declares that this way they can focus more on their studies, and Kiao replies that this is unnecessary. Moreover, everyone knows exactly who the girl is referring to. The black-haired girl gives a terrifying look to her rival, leaving her extremely intimidated, and then states that she has something to ask the girl. A minute earlier, we see Ning thinking that as she suspected, Yoayao is really picky with food. As she eats her meal, she continues observing Tang Sin and our protagonist's conversation. Looking at the president, the girl states that she has to get along with her because if she doesn't have a conversation with her rival, things might get worse. The young woman wonders what she could talk about with Tang Sin. At one moment, she thinks of something and suddenly calls for the president. Ning Yi then says that she has something to ask, and the white fox wonders why her rival is looking at her like that. However, gently, Ning states that she plans to invite Bai Kiao to join the literature club, and that the boy is also interested. Then she asks what the girl's opinion on that is. Tang Sin wonders why Ning is asking her this and concludes that possibly the girl is trying to steal Bai Kiao from her. The young woman raises the possibility that Ning has discovered her plans, but then tells herself that only she and little Tangerine knew about them. She states that she doesn't think her friend would reveal her plans to her rival, and she even looks at Tangerine with a killer glare, leaving the young woman confused. The president continues trying to understand what caused that situation, and Bai Kiao thinks that Ning's emotionless face and cold tone are once again being misinterpreted. Tang Sin turns to the vice president and says that she heard he was really interested in joining the literature club, and the boy responds that he is. The white-haired girl says that the plants in the council room might get some extra nutrients later, like fertilizer, and the boy tries to say that he didn't even want to join the club that much. Tangerine approaches and says that although they don't prevent council members from joining other clubs, it wasn't recommended as it would interfere with their work performance. Having his ear pinched by Tangerine, the boy simply states that he promises to finish his work before going to the club. Ning simply says that Bei doesn't need to dedicate himself to the literature club, and that he could participate in activities from time to time if he was free. Tang remains persistent and says that she doesn't think joining another club is a good idea since it's possible that he might get distracted from his work in the council while taking care of the club. However, Kyo's fake girlfriend also doesn't give up and says that, to be frank, she takes care of all the club's matters and is sure that it won't bother Bai Kiao. In the middle of that crossfire, the boy only wishes that the president would give him permission since things had already gone too far. However, the council president simply says that she's sorry, and all three around her look at her. The girl states that they received a request from the city's tourism administration and that it seems the work is extremely complicated and extensive, which would keep Kiao busy. While Tang Sin celebrates, saying that this must be the best reason to reject it, Ming, Bai, and his fake girlfriend exchange glances. At that moment, the white fox begins to cry and victimize herself, saying that she misses the old Bai, who gave all his attention to the student council. Being as understanding as she was, Ning starts to leave, only apologizing and then asking them to ignore her request. The white-haired girl says it's all right and that Ning doesn't need to apologize, and adds that the conversation was just to resolve pending issues. Kiao sighs, catching the president's attention and trying to talk to her, somewhat discouraged. However, that cunning girl immediately apologizes, saying that she didn't think about his feelings when she was talking to Ning. She states that the only thing on her mind was their work in the student council, and that maybe this happened because of Bai's weak presence. The boy simply says he gives up and then asks what request she was referring to earlier. The girl begins to explain about a job assigned to them by the travel administrator. Tangerine, Kiao, and Tang Sin just stare at that request, not knowing what to do. The council president says that actually she had an idea of how to do it perfectly, and as if they were connected, they all agreed to refuse the request. Sometime later in the principal's office, the woman states that they couldn't refuse that request. She explains that they faced many challenges to get that project and says that the school has high hopes for the council members. Before dismissing them, she simply thanks them for any help they can provide and then asks them to inform her if they encounter any problems. Irritated, Tangerine wonders what is wrong with the principal since they hadn't even started discussing it, and Tang says that they won't reach a consensus anyway. The orange-haired girl asks if the president didn't want to try recruiting more people for the student council, and Kiao asks if she had a plan. Tang then asks if the boy isn't coming to her house tomorrow, leaving our protagonist confused. She says she'll tell him her plan when Xiao is at her house and the boy feels pressured. Tangerine clings to the boy's arm, smiling and saying with a malicious face that he had to go, and the boy, even feeling threatened, accepts. With an extremely serious expression, Tangerine asks a certain someone if they prepared anything for tomorrow since it will be a special day. Our protagonist realizes that she was referring to the visit to Tang Sin's house and says that he didn't prepare anything, but Tangerine gets annoyed, questioning how he could do that. The young girl approaches Kiao, saying that she spent so much time and energy on them, and yet the boy still didn't do anything. Because of that, he was lucky to have her by their side. Tangerine brings her fist close to the boy's face and threatens him, demanding that he listen to her and do as she says. The girl informs him that he needs to understand that Madam President is inviting him to her house, and for that reason, he cannot disappoint her. Then we see that Tangerine completely fixed Kiao up, making him wear a tie, a suit, even style in his hair. At that moment, Tang Sin heads to the door, opening it and greeting Kiao excitedly for finally arriving. The boy hands her a bouquet of flowers just as Tangerine had ordered, and this catches Tang Sin off guard. Tangerine continues speaking, saying that based on her knowledge of the president, as soon as this happened, she would become worried about being dressed so casually. The girl also informs him that when the time comes, the boy should lovingly hold the president's hand and then, with his sweetest voice, tell her that he loves her. However, Kiao shatters that entire fantasy, and we see that, in reality, all of this was just Tangerine's imagination of what he should do. The boy states that this makes no sense and that there is no reason to kiss the president's hand since they are only going there to discuss work. The orange-haired girl agrees, saying that if the boy tried too hard to get her attention, Tang's hunter instinct might make her lose interest. Kiao then asks what his friend is going to do, and the girl simply responds that she will stay home and wait for good news, leaving Bai extremely irritated by this. Putting on an act, the girl starts playing the victim and then says that she sacrificed too much just to leave the two lovebirds alone for a while. The next day, we see that he practically did everything Tangerine told him to and was very well dressed, but in his head, he questions why he did this. Bai hands the bouquet of flowers to his classmate, and the young girl asks him to sit down while she walks away happily, until suddenly, Kiao hears a noise outside. A girl arrives in front of Tang Sin's house riding a motorcycle and quickly parks in front of the gate. She asks if our protagonist is Tang's boyfriend, but the boy replies that he is not, that he is just a member of her school's council and is there to discuss work. The person, who has a helmet on her head, approaches the boy and asks if he likes Tang, making Kiao very uncomfortable. The boy tries to respond that he doesn't, since they are just friends, while internally questioning who this girl is and why she is asking such strange questions. Before taking off her cat ear helmet, the girl concludes that it's probably the white fox who likes him, and confused, Bai Kiao asks who she is. The stranger states that even though the boy is just Tang's classmate, it doesn't hurt to say who she is, and with that, she removes her helmet, revealing beautiful hair with purple streaks. The girl reveals that she is Tang's creditor, and that she is there to collect the payment for her debt. While saying this, she starts chewing gum. Our protagonist is confused upon hearing this, not even knowing how to react to it. The girl explains that Tangerine's mother's company was on the verge of bankruptcy a few years ago, and because of that, she lent money to her mother to pay off the debts. The woman agreed to pay last year, but it seems she is not going to do so anytime soon. However, fortunately, she had a beautiful daughter who could be sold. Chio becomes even more confused, questioning whether Tang Sin was really financially struggling and if this was some kind of prank. The purple-haired girl approaches the door, asking if her baby, Sin, is there and then stating that from today on, the girl belongs to her. However, Kiao steps in to intervene, saying that this woman is very suspicious. He grabs her jacket, immediately pulling her back, and soon after, the boy tells his classmate to run, while unintentionally pulling the creditor's jacket. The girl starts blowing up the gum in her mouth and seems quite irritated by this, stating that she didn't want to do this but was forced to. She grabs our protagonist's tie and says that, as expected, a brat will always act like a brat, no matter the situation. The biker girl knocks the boy to the ground, saying that brats always think they are heroes and that this is extremely frustrating. On top of Bai Kiao, she gets ready and states that she will teach the young boy a lesson. She prepares a punch and starts bringing her fist toward our protagonist's face, declaring that he will never meddle in other people's affairs again. However, for some unknown reason, she stops right when she's about to hit the young man's nose. The girl starts laughing euphorically, leaving Bai Kiao completely confused about the situation. Inside the house, Tang Sin was cutting a lemon when she heard the laughter and realized that the problem was there again. The biker calls Bai an idiot and introduces herself as Tang Lin, Tang Sin's cousin and a first-year high school student at the Beijing Academy of Performing Arts. Tang Lin, in an attempt to give more details about herself and tease Bai Kiao, begins to pull down the strap of her bra while talking about her 3 measurements. However, at that moment, Tang Sin arrives behind her cousin, places a knife against her neck, and covers her mouth to stop her from talking nonsense. The fox apologizes to her colleague, saying that her cousin is crazy and that he doesn't need to pay attention to what she says, while the victim tries to say that Kiao is cute. After hearing and processing all the information, Kiao realizes that she is from a theater school and that everything was just an act. The boy admits that he really thought he was going to be attacked. The student council president, on the other hand, questions why the girl is there, and Tang Lin, looking at Bai Kiao, begins to explain. She falls on top of Tang and informs her that their family dinner is today, but she heard that her cousin wasn't going because she was busy with classes. However, her instincts told her that maybe Tang Sin was bringing her boyfriend home, so she refused to go to the dinner. She states that she also made up an excuse to the family to see what was going on with her cousin, and as expected, she was right. The young girl stares at her cousin, and the cunning fox turns completely red at the situation since she is not used to being put on the spot. However, she realizes that her cousin knows too much, and while grabbing a knife, she states that she will just put an end to it. Seeing this, Bai Kyo breaks the tension, saying that they are only there to discuss work with his colleague while making a call. In a video call with Tangerine, he says that there was one more person who was supposed to come too, but due to some circumstances, she couldn't make it. The orange-haired girl introduces herself to Tang Lin, who, upon seeing this, becomes quite confused. Lin lets go of her cousin, stating that this is really boring, and immediately asks when they are going to eat since she is starving. On the other hand, the president says that they are not eating yet and that she can grab a bowl and wait at the door for food. The biker calls her cruel. Sometime later, we see the three inside the house when Tang Sin starts to notice that her cousin is doing something inappropriate. She covers Bai Kyo's eyes while questioning Tang Lin about what she is doing and if she has lost her mind. Taking off her coat, the girl explains that she was just changing clothes that she was lying earlier, and that in reality she came there to use her cousin's pool because she was feeling hot. Accidentally, Tang Sin ends up pressing her melons against our protagonist's back, and Tang Lin questions why the two are so close and if they are flirting. Upon hearing this, Tang Sin simply replies that Kyo is too young to see her clothes and that she won't let him look at other girls. The actress realizes that she was right and then says that even if her cousin covers his eyes now, the boy will still be able to see her when she's in the pool. Looking to the side, Tang Sin notices that the glass doors give a full view of the pool and realizes that won't be enough. Frustrated, she starts walking and pulling her cousin, asking her to follow her. Before entering a room, the girl asks Bai Kyo to close the curtains for her, slamming the door shut afterward. The young man agrees, doing as he was told while questioning what the girls are going to do and whether he is really there just to work. On the other hand, now that she is alone with her cousin, the young girl states that she thinks they will be fine now. She turns around asking her cousin to listen to her. However, the two end up colliding their melons. After the planetary collision, the actress starts teasing her cousin, reminding her not to forget that they share the same blood. The shy young girl also says that they can't do this, and the fox, caught off guard, is left confused by the situation. Then Tang Lin asks if her cousin doesn't want to change clothes with her to go into the pool. Tang Lin keeps touching her cousin's body while asking if she doesn't want to go to the pool. The student council president refuses, placing her hand over her cousin's face and saying that she's fine and that the girl can go alone. However, her cousin questions if the girl doesn't want to go because she only has normal swimsuits and is embarrassed to wear them in front of the boys she likes. The white-haired girl tells her to shut up since that's nonsense, and Lin asks if she is implying that having a crush on Bai is foolish. However, being as cunning as she is, the fox says that no matter how she responds, her cousin will use it against her and that she won't fall for such childish tricks to reveal her feelings. The actress then decides she will just ask Bai Kyo directly if her cousin likes him, and upon hearing this, Tang Sin becomes flustered and almost falls off the chair she is sitting on. She steps in front of the door, saying that the girl won't get through, but Tang Lin says that maybe she can't leave, but the girl is trapped as well. The woman says that, in fact, she checked the room before entering and noticed that there were no panties there. In other words, without anything underneath, her cousin wouldn't dare to leave this room. Upon hearing this, the fox realizes that for some reason, her bottom piece has already disappeared. Completely shy and embarrassed, she tries to cover herself while questioning when the young girl did this. With a confident stance, Tang Lin simply responds that she has no idea. Before leaving the room, she asks Tang Xin to stay there for a while since she will be back after she finishes having fun with Bai Kyo. Back in the living room, while calmly sipping his tea, Bai Kyo is suddenly surprised by a presence calling him, which startles the boy. Tang Lin, now dressed in a bikini, says that Tang Xin is busy and that she will accompany him for the rest of the day. Then she asks if the boy isn't finding the room hot. The boy replies that he isn't, but after thinking about it, he admits that it's just a little, and the girl sees this as an opportunity to take advantage. Sometime later, we see the two on a water slide with Bai Kyo wearing swimwear. Tang Lin says that she always wanted to play on Tang Xin's water slide since it was gathering dust because no one used it. Then she calls Bai Kyo to ride the float with her. The boy replies that he will pass on this opportunity, but the cunning girl doesn't give up and says that if he gets in, she will show him childhood photos of Tang Xin. Chao immediately jumps onto the float, thinking that if he gets embarrassing photos of the president, his life will be much easier. Tang Lin realizes that something is definitely going on between them. Finally, they go down the slide together on the float, and the girl looks very excited and happy about the situation. Our protagonist thinks that the young girl has a bold, cool, and amazing personality, but she hides a cuter side behind her helmet. After that, they land in the pool, creating a big splash and sending water everywhere. A while later, with a phone in his hand, looking at photos of the student council president, the boy seems somewhat disappointed, not very satisfied with them. Tang Lin asks what he thinks of the photos and if the president isn't as cute as always, and the boy agrees. However, analyzing the pictures, he realizes that the girl doesn't have a single weird-looking photo and finds it scary how perfect she is. For some reason, he sees a photo of a younger Tang Lin alongside a boy, and this piques his interest. The protagonist asks if that is Tang Lin, and the young girl seems startled upon seeing it. Flustered, she replies that yes, it's her. However, she states that the other person in the photo doesn't know it exists. She asks if our protagonist wants to hear a story. The boy seems confused, so Lin says it's about a girl who met her first love for the first time. At that moment, at the top of the water slide, Tang Xin arrives imposingly, calling out to her cousin. She questions how her cousin dares to take Bai Kyo, whom she just met, to the pool out of nowhere, while striking a menacing pose. However, the young girl ends up slipping and immediately shoots down the water slide. Since she came down with so much force, Tang Lin's bikini top flies off and lands on Bai's head. The boy, picking it up, looks confused, wondering what the hell it is. Thinking carefully, he realizes what it is. Then we see that Tang Lin is without the top part of her bikini. The girl turns completely red like a tomato, not even knowing what to say. Tang Lin begins to tell her story and says that when a girl experiences love for the first time, she feels embarrassed and confused. And that's what she felt, but before that, she never thought she would fall in love with someone during her school days. The young girl recounts that all the boys in her school gave her the impression of being a bunch of immature pranksters, and her type was someone mature and reliable. Because of that, she never had the desire to date anyone during her school years, but there was a certain person who was different. We then see the young girl bullying a boy from her class. Tang Lin continues saying that this person was exactly the opposite of her type since he was reckless and impulsive. Even so, that boy made her laugh a lot despite everything. The girl says that despite everything, the more she learned about him, the more she liked him and realized that his traits and personality were what attracted her the most. She recounts that before she could even notice, she had fallen in love with a guy she used to hate. And at this moment, we see Bai Qiao putting his friend's bikini top on her. Tang Lin continues, saying that at the time she was completely confused about what to do since she wanted to get closer to him. However, she wasn't willing to confess her feelings because she didn't know how to do it properly. The young girl comments that all she could do to talk to him was correct his homework as a student council member or tease him. She recalls that she always thought boys were childish, but it seemed that she was just like them, and without realizing it, she fell for him more and more. As she says this, she also comments that she was just like a certain little first-year girl who mistreated her love, and Tang Xin feels attacked. The fox throws herself onto her cousin's back, begging her to let go of the past since she keeps talking about her first love, even though it's time to forget it. With a killer look, she orders Tang Lin not to even think about telling a boy she just met what's in her little heart and demands to know what she wants. The biker, on the other hand, says that it's not like Bai Qiao would take it to heart or anything, so there's no need to worry. Grabbing her cousin's face, the young girl asks if the fox remembers what happened afterward. She continues the story and says that time passed like a gust of wind, and she graduated without ever confessing her feelings for him, sealing them inside her heart. However, last summer, she saw him at the airport, and it broke her heart. Tang Lin comments that it seemed like her former love had found someone willing to walk the path of life with him. But she couldn't object since that was her choice, and she was willing to accept reality, even though it was very painful. Finally, she says that fortunately, thanks to that, she could share her experience with Bai Qiao and her cousin. Upon hearing this, Tang Xin asks if the boy understood the message behind the story. Then the girl with purple streaks waves goodbye to her friends and says she's going to rest a bit, and that Tang Xin can continue her work now and have fun. Bai Qiao then states that this is how it happened. Tang Lin left and they returned to their original work schedule. The young boy recounts that little Tangerine, who was working from home, wrote them a draft sketch, and he and Tang Xin were responsible for something else. However, looking at Tang's tablet screen, Bai Qiao thinks that as time passed, he suddenly remembered something deeply ingrained in his colleague's DNA. Our protagonist yells at Madam President that this isn't good, and the girl looks confused. Tang Xin asks what he is talking about. Our protagonist asks if she hasn't noticed anything. The young boy states that his colleague had said she was going to sketch the illustrations, but she started drawing something completely unrelated. The girl says that she realized something was off, and looking at the vice president's face, mentions that she had told him to drink more water because it was windy outside. Then Tang states that he looks exactly like her drawing. And then we see that the girl had actually painted a portrait of Bai Qiao. Feeling the touch of the president's hand, Bai Qiao becomes completely nervous about it. He shouts, saying that he doesn't think they are on the same page. However, Tang Lin asks him not to move because she's almost finished. However, as if they were connected, both of their stomachs growl, and he feels an immense hunger. With an extremely cute expression, the young girl takes Bai Qiao's hand, saying that she is hungry, and besides that, there is a kitchen right there. Even without her asking for anything, he instantly refuses, saying that he won't cook for her, because his sister told him not to cook for bad girls. The fox, on the other hand, pouts while questioning if he would cook if they made a bet, and Bai Qiao asks what she's talking about. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.